Hey, Brent. Silly season starter.
Unmuted, just so everyone's aware. What we're looking for is that specifically.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay, great. Welcome, everybody. So today is Tuesday, January 16th, 2024, and this is the Cottonwood Heights City Council work session. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We'll start our meeting today with reviewing our business meeting agenda this evening. We've got a full slate for both our work session and our business agenda, so we'll be busy today. So we'll start with a pledge like always. So this evening we have an acknowledgement for the recognition of the city's historic committee award. So if you saw the social media, you might have seen a historic committee picture up at the governor's mansion for an award that they won from the Utah Historical Society. So we're gonna actually give them the award and kind of give a little bit of background why they won the award. So that is how we will start. And the next item that's noticed is our citizen comment period. And I just realized our city council reports are not on here.
I actually noticed that too.
So we didn't notice it, so I don't think we're gonna be able to do that. Shane, right? Yeah, okay. So we will,
Maybe we can catch up with that first week in February.
yeah, we might.
If it can fit in, it would be
Yeah,
nice.
we'll look at that. So apologize for that that didn't get on there. So. Okay, and then, after our citizen comment period, we will do a public hearing. And, which is going to be a proposed budget amendment for our current 2023-2024 fiscal year. I'm not going to talk about that yet because that's what under a staff report that we'll have Scott talk about in just a few minutes here. We have two quarterly staff reports tonight. And so Matt's under the gun with the Public Works report. He's ready to talk about snow plowing and all the fun things in the Public Works world. Everything is great, exactly. We're looking forward to that, Matt, so no pressure. And then the second staff report is a busy night for Scott because he will be doing a quarterly financial report. So we'll do an update to our finances over the past fourth quarter and see how we are in line to how we should be towards our budget. And then we have 4 legislative items for tonight. The first one being 7.1, consideration of ordinance 407, amending code section 11.060 concerning parking restrictions for certain vehicles. So if you remember correctly, we discussed this item in our last meeting. And this had to do with parking our RVs, how long an RV should be able to park on a street before needing to be moved. So let's, Chief, did you want to address that? Mike, did you have anything to say about that? I know with Tim gone, is there anything you want to address?
No, there was an ordinance drafted. This might be a discussion item on the work session, but we can address it now quick.
No, if it is, we'll do it then. And you're right, it is. So.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yep, we'll discuss it here in just a couple of minutes. Thanks. So, depending on how that discussion goes, we will possibly vote on that item first tonight. The next item, 7.2, consideration of resolution 2024-05, consenting to an appointment to the Arts Council. Reappointment to the Arts Council. I know we have the name of Chiara. I hope I said that right. Chiara or Ciara Powers Mike, do you have anything to add to this? I know Tim would usually do that.
I don't on this one. No, I wasn't
Okay.
part of this process.
Okay, so
Apologize.
to get to this point, he would have talked with Ciara and made sure she's willing to continue serving. And she was willing, and so he was recommending a reappointment of a new 3-year term for Ciara. So we will vote on that reappointment tonight. And then 7.3, consideration of resolution 2024-06, awarding a retiring police officer her badge and approving her purchase of a police firearm. So Chief, I imagine this is for Officer Harris, correct?
Yes,
Yeah, do you have anything you want to say about it?
sure. Polly Harris was an officer at the University of Utah when we started the police department in 2008. She came over and was a distinguished member of the police department. She served very well. I will miss her dearly. She was a very intelligent, competent, strong, kind officer in every way. We sent her to Brighton High School to be the SRO, and she represented us well, and the school district and handled the kids and that were generations. She hit her 20-year mark. Polly is known as a triathlete. She travels the world and competes in triathlons. She's very skilled, and she's just at that point in her life where she, a couple of her siblings have passed and her parents have passed, and she wants to retire, and she's going to go live and teach in Japan. She'll be leaving here in another month, and we would like to honor her service by awarding her badge and her firearm, as is customary in these cases, and we'd support your vote on that.
Great. So, and I'll add to that, Polly will be, she was beloved over at the high school. So, many people were appreciative of all she did, and she went through some things that weren't so easy at times. And so we're grateful for her service over there and as an officer. So I might have you, I wasn't going to do this, Chief, but I might have you restate what you just did in the business meeting.
Okay.
If that's okay. So I think that would be a good tribute towards her.
Can I ask a
Yes.
quick question, Chief? Well, you've been going through a lot of personnel changes. How is that going for you? Are you getting the folks you need here? And
Yes, we are. We're filling the spots. I'm finding though that the laterals, I'm not getting I've got a couple of good ones, but I've got a lot that don't meet our standards. So I'm going back to our roots, and we've got a hiring process now where I'm just gonna have to hire brand new kids, put them through the academy, train them the way we want them to train, and then grow. The problem with that is it takes a year before the time I hire them to get them through the academy, to get them through FTO, to release them on their own, but it's worth the investment. So that's where we're at.
okay,
Where we are weak is, again, we lost 2 female officers. So I have 1 female in the department. We're good on diversity with the exception of women. And I saw 1 female application in this latest recruitment process, and anything we could do to attract more interest by women for the industry, we would love to do that.
yeah, that's what I asked for. If you needed any support, on finding folks.
If you know a young woman that would like to compete, we would love to see her application.
She's 5. I don't think it'll work right now.
By the time we get her through, she'll be 6.
Great. Great. Well, thank you, Chief, for that. I appreciate it. The last item that we will consider as a council to vote on will be consideration of resolution 2024-07 ratifying committee assignments. So in our packet, you're all aware of the committees that you've been assigned to. We did make a change in the last 24 hours. We pulled which is 100% my fault. The public or the mayor pro tempore, that's how you pronounce it according to Shane, so I'm going to say it that way for now. Mayor pro tempore is actually not a mayor's assignment. It's done by a secret ballot from the council. And so because we didn't get that noticed in time, we're gonna do that at our first meeting in February. Where we will have everybody participate in a secret ballot and we will elect that way a more mayor pro tempore.
And I'll be absent that day. I will.
You'll
I'll
be,
be on vacation.
oh, you will, okay, okay. Well, good. So anyway, any other questions or comments from the council on committee assignments? Anything you'd like to say about your responsibilities for the coming year? This might be a good time.
I'd just like to say I was glad to change some committees and give some to others. I think it's really important that we have that diverse voice and not be one locked in individual forever and ever on that committee. So I thought it was really nice to go through this process.
Great. Anything from anybody else? Okay, well, we'll look forward to hearing about these assignments each month on how they're going and how they're benefiting our city. And then the last item for tonight is going to be the consent calendar. Approval. Okay, so item 3 on our agenda is a legislative update and discussions. You probably saw in our packet that we have this is also on our website, but it's a legislative priorities, I think is what we call it. Cottonwood Heights legislative priorities. And so we have asked our city lobbyist, Brian Allen, and Greg Curtis. I don't know if Chantel's here. I don't see Chantel. She's not here to come and give us an update, and we'll ask you some questions. So if you guys want to come up to the table, that'd be great. Greg, I already saw you once. Was it this week or last week? I guess it was last week. At the Economic Summit, right?
Yeah, this last Friday.
Last Friday, that's right.
Time flies. That was so much fun.
Yeah. And we were there with Brian, yeah.
Well,
Great.
good afternoon.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting us. We appreciate that. I'm gonna just give you a brief rundown of some of the legislation that just hit the highlights.
Okay.
Where there's still a lot of bill files that don't have language, so we don't know a whole lot about those, but there's,
I copy name.
Brian Allen.
Thank you.
So there's still a lot of unknown out there, but we're certainly on top of all of those and watching them carefully. But a few things that you'll want to know about, I think. House Bill 5, which is the appropriations bill for the natural resources, does have some trail money in it, so there's some opportunities there maybe down the road. There is a bill, House Bill 11, that would impose some requirements on governmental entities, including cities, on water lands, water-wise landscaping. So at government-owned facilities, that I don't know where that's going to end up, but we're
That
watching
was
that.
House Bill 11.
House Bill 11, yeah.
Do you think it's something that we already have covered in with our sustainability and our guidelines that we already have? I mean, we may, I don't know, Mike, if you had a chance to look at it, but maybe we've already complied with what we're striving for.
Yeah, it wouldn't be
municipalities.
surprising if you had.
Yeah.
hadn't all- I mean, if you, it would.
Or does it look onerous for the city?
No, it looks like you'd already be in line with what they're doing, so I don't think it's anything.
We can double check. Ours are in line with the guidelines of the water district that are required if residents want to get the subsidies for flip your strip and landscaping
Yeah.
programs. So ours are kind of too standard unless they're
Well,
changing.
this applies only to governmental properties.
Oh,
not particular
okay.
bill. So it'd be what the city can do with.
City
it.
Hall.
Good to know.
Yeah,
Okay.
so something to think
Sorry,
about.
what did you say House Bill 5 was?
That's the appropriation bill for the natural resources.
Okay.
There is House Bill 13, which is the infrastructure financing district. It's a much better bill than it has been in years past. The league is watching it. It would give taxing authority to developers to develop infrastructure for property. It doesn't really, there's a lot of good things in it that the league has been really active, and then I've talked with Representative Dunnigan. There's a lot of good things in it, and I think that.
What was the number on that one?
That's House Bill 13. The impetus behind it obviously is affordable housing. The one thing that's not in the bill that's interesting is there's no real demand for any accountability on affordable housing. So that's something that the league I know is interested in, and and we've been talking with them about.
So this just, some background was a bill I was really concerned with last year, because it actually, they were talking about eminent domain
All that stuff.
and, yeah, okay.
This only has, I think the only real tricky thing about this bill now in the mechanics of it is that is the lien is supposed to be satisfied before a building permit is issued. And there's not a way right now, a convenient way for the cities to be able to track whether or not a lien has actually been satisfied.
Yeah.
Without making an inquiry to this. So we're trying to figure out if there's a way that we can make that a little bit easier for cities to do, to manage when these infrastructure districts are in place. So there's still some things that I think need to get worked out around that. So we're working on that with the league as well. But because right now, I mean, nobody, I don't think when they're issuing building permits, nobody's checking to see if the deep's encumbered anyway.
Right.
So, I mean, that piece of property is covered. So we're watching that. There's a House Bill 32, which is short-term rental modifications. That one only applies to the definition, which they're stating there that cars are not short-term rentals. So that doesn't really impact us. I guess there's a growing, like Turo and those companies, they were fearful of getting wrapped into some of these short-term rental bills. And because, so that just clarifies that it doesn't apply to cars. And I guess that even applies to cars that people might live in. So,
Is that a new trend that people are trying to live in RVs? And I mean, I've read an article recently somewhere on the west side and there were people living out of their car. I'm trying to understand that.
well, this one is really
This is more
geared
renting
towards
cars.
the people who are
Renting
renting the
personal
cars
cars.
out, like a short-term rental.
Oh,
car rental.
I'm with you. I
But-
got it. And
But
it's-
it would actually apply to those RVs and those, if they were being rented out as short-term rentals. I don't know that anybody's doing that. I know there are a lot of homeless people living in our old RVs that you see parked all over on the west side of the Salt Lake. That's not,
And so this would restrict people's ability to use like Airbnb to rent, hey, rent our vehicle while you're renting our Airbnb.
well, it
lodging.
wouldn't restrict that. It just clarifies that short-term car rentals don't fall under any of the short-term rental definitions in statute.
Okay, got it.
Property.
It's really just
But
excluding
it doesn't,
that.
excuse me, it doesn't also exempt like sprinter vans. I mean, I know people can rent sprinter vans for a short period of time.
Yeah.
That's
All that,
something you can live in.
that would be exempted.
That is-
There's a bill, fireworks bill. I don't know if you've seen it. It's House Bill 155. All it does is add Constitution Day as a day that you can light off fireworks, which is in September.
Constitution Day.
Yeah. Like September 17th or something like that. I don't know exactly what the day is. I should know.
I was gonna make Sean say that.
I don't know if any, that's a big impact. But there is a bill, House Bill 175, Representative Gwynn has, it would allow cities to impose impact fees on residences. Right now, they're prohibited from doing this, but it would allow them to impose an impact fee for fire suppression equipment. So if you had to grow that, so that's probably a positive bill. There's a bill about filling elected official vacancies. I know that Scott Bracken, before he got out, talked to me about some quirky thing about if there's a midterm vacancy and there's a vote, there's a kind of a quirky process that if there's a fix there, done, this is the bill to do it. I don't know exactly what
What was the number? Did that one, did you say?
it is, House Bill 176.
Yeah, what the previous legislation from the year previous did is allowed the mayor to vote twice.
In a system like ours where we have a council, that he's a voting member of the council. Who is the sponsor of that bill? I reached out to that legislator last year.
Matthew Gwynn,
Gwynn,
Representative Gwynn. I don't know if he had that same bill last year, but somebody else.
but the one that had the language that was
Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's Ryan Wilcox.
Ryan Wilcox.
Wilcox was last year's bill.
I don't know this year.
This year.
I don't know
Oh,
about
got it.
last year. I'd have to look.
Okay.
And then Representative Benyon, House Bill 180, that's for short-term rental bill. I think the league is not taking a position on it. They're in a kind of a watch mode. I don't know if you've looked at it.
I haven't gained anything we need to be aware of.
I think it's good for the city. I think it gives the city some power over enforcement. Whether or not it can pass, I don't, in its current form, I don't.
Include, because I know there's another one out there that's really focused on, all short-term rentals have to have a tax number. So it'll give the state a better ability to make sure that it's
Yeah,
not only
that's
receiving the
in
tax
there.
monies,
That's
but
in
it'll
there,
help,
Bill.
I think, ultimately municipalities to track who is
Yeah.
doing short-term rentals.
That is.
And that seemed like a positive, but I can't remember if that is in Galen Benyon's
I believe it's in there,
bill
Bill.
and in the other, because there's, I think, two.
I haven't known, we are not tracking a second one. We only have hers on here right now.
Okay.
So if there's another one out there, I haven't seen language for it. But hers does have the taxing, the requirement in there.
Yeah, I think anything that gives us better teeth to
Yeah.
follow the trail and do enforcement, a lot of my constituents are.
And then Doug Owens has a bill, House Bill 195, that would require cities to consider wildlife impact when they're doing planning and zoning.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
I'm not sure how to react to that one.
Well, I mean, we do in some areas have some wildlife impact. I mean, sure, but I don't know how, I don't know. Like, it doesn't really spell out the process, or it just says you have to consider it. So it's kind of nebulous. There is another bill that's positive, I think, for the city. It's House Bill 235. It's an eminent domain bill that would allow eminent domain to be used for the Bonneville Shoreline Trail.
It's specific to that trail.
Yes, specifically.
Okay.
Only to
Only to
BSD.
that trail.
Okay.
And
That'll definitely have an impact on our city.
there's an interesting bill, I don't know. You know, billboards is always a big deal, but the scenic byway program amendments that Senator Harper has changes the scenic byway commission to add a member of the outdoor billboard community to the board. So that was interesting. You know,
Interesting.
one to watch anyway. I know that's pretty much it for what we have. Let's go to the hot ones right now, so.
Okay.
Do we have a designated scenic byway in our Cottonwood Heights city limits?
No.
We do not.
Not that there's one.
Because I think that was one of the strategies when we were trying to figure out how to protect Wasatch Boulevard from becoming highway-esque. We were trying to see if it had a scenic byway. Do you recollect this, Mike?
We had asked them to declare it as a special character corridor or something like that. I don't know that we use scenic byway in particular, but we use that as a comparison of, hey, you do this in other places, can you do it here and treat it differently?
Yeah,
That's what I remember.
yeah.
There are a number of bills around water development that don't directly impact the city, but are peripheral. And then obviously air quality issues. There's a lot of there's some legislation around that. Most of it, right? It's most of the ones that are out and numbered and have language are pretty minor. It's kind of more specific to some vehicle related things that you could strip vehicle registration if it didn't meet emission requirements, that type of thing.
To your recollection, did any of them deal with vehicle miles traveled?
Greg, anything from you?
Well, I talked with Tim a couple of weeks ago. He indicated that he met with Senator Colmore, and there were some priorities that he mentioned. First one, trails. You are aware that UDOT now has $45 million a year for trails. They are generally, they want them to be multi-regional, meaning connecting jurisdictions, and they want them to be not like a Bonneville Shoreline Trail where you're hiking, but you could ride your e-bike on or other things. So if you had a desire to go down to go out to lunch in Holiday, there might be a trail that ran along and connect, and they're in a process, and UDOT has become very proficient at this over the past 10 or 15 years, and more their budget increases. They now have a process where they study and prioritize and take forever. And so they got $45 million last year, or they actually got $90 million last year. I'll get another $45 million this year. That's ongoing money. And so we should be candidly, I've worked with other jurisdictions where they've come in and said, well, we need a trail. We just want to connect this part to that part. If it doesn't cross a multi-jurisdictional boundary, UDOT will almost immediately set it off.
May I just ask for a point of clarification? Mike, when we were all, a group of us, you and I and Matt Schiff we're at the table for the WFRC. And we were identifying on a big map. That was more for SS4A. That wasn't for this.
I think that was, they called it like the Beehive Bikeway System or something like that, but it was the state.
These monies.
Yeah,
that-
the state funding where it was like the
referred to.
trail along 215 connecting Holiday and Cotton Heights and Murray. And those kind of regional backbone type trails. That is what you're thinking of.
Okay, and then we identified Creek Road and Bengal and.
Yeah, that was a mix. So there were some trails on that map that would fit the description that Greg's talking about. And then we added some that would probably not. They'd be more local priorities that we would need to pursue.
Unless, of course, we pointed out that those roads go on into
Sure.
Midvale.
Yeah, you have to
and
tie them
east
to-
the-
Yeah, no, and
Yeah.
if they're trails dedicated, they want them to be dedicated trails. The idea is, some of them have visions that we're all going to be riding our bikes like they do in Copenhagen, Denmark, and, I don't share that vision with them personally, but if you've ever been there, you'll see that there are literally tens of thousands of people every morning that get up, get on their bike and ride all over the city, and they have dedicated.
But
bike lanes.
do these, you know, as we all know, we have a lot of asphalt that's laid already. They're called street collectors and arterials. And so like the big Cottonwood Trail that I understand would extend beyond Knutson Park. And that would, I think, be a qualifier, right? Because it would go all the way to Willer Farm, which is technically in Murray.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that would be a total example of
Absolutely.
what you just described. But on the other hand, making it safe for people to go east-west, whether they're walking or riding their bicycles on Creek Road, you know, these east-west collectors and arterials. I just want everybody at the table to contemplate this and make sure. And do we do that process through the WFRC or do we
So-
go directly to
A
UDOT?
lot of those more local ones, that's a good question on the UDOT money. I don't know how we would access that. The local ones, there's like the county's, corridor preservation program, and UDOT has an existing, our bike lanes that we're building on Fort Union are funded by a UDOT active transportation fund, and there's county funds as well. Do you know, Greg, how the state money will be accessed?
Well, this money it sits with UDOT and, it would ultimately be accessed through their prioritization process. They are working with Wasatch Front in identifying trails, et cetera. And Creek Road would be a great example if the community said, okay, let's find a road that goes all the way through Island Drive or something like that. And saying what they want is they want lane separation, and they want so that people can walk or ride their bike, or there's still discussion as to nowadays with EV, electric bikes. You can get electric bikes that look like a motorcycle. It'll go 60 miles an hour. They're trying to say, it's not necessarily what we had in mind for these lanes, but the idea is to get grade separated lanes so people can move about and not have to interact with traffic.
Well, and that's when they did the slide presentation where it showed one example after another, and then we clapped or did something as to whether that met what you just described, which is truly safety for all users versus what we have now, which is just a painted line, and you hope the motorists don't go off and wipe out.
Right.
Cyclists.
And the best example would be is the newer highways that they're building along Mountain View Corridor out in the west, or the West Davis Highway, Legacy Highway. There's a trail that you can get on in someplace in North Salt Lake. I mean, I've started at the Fair Park, and you can ride your bike all the way past Lagoon and never interact with traffic. Okay, Mountain View Corridor, I guess that ride bikes, well, a lot, road bikes love to go out there because they can ride this trail for literally 20 miles. The challenge is new highways, it's easy when they're buying right away. It's a lot more challenging where the population base is to get those grades separated. Or that, when I say grade separated, I mean lane separated type things. But it will be, when you think about it, $190 million infusion to start, and $45 million a year, and UDOT is quick to point out, hey, that's not going to go very far. And I'm going, well, it's going to go a lot further than the 2 or 3 million a year that you just put in there. So
Yeah.
there are some things. One of the things that they're looking at is this canals and trying to work with canal companies and saying, can we pave alongside the canals, and there's issues of liability when somebody crashes their bike in the canal and drowns. Canal saying, we much prefer to just have our gravel road that we tell everybody you can't trespass on it. But if you know the canal trails, I mean, you could literally get on the canal roads out in Bluffdale and work your way probably to Murray without ever, you have to cross some streets, but you don't interact. Jordan River Trail, stuff like that. So there is that money.
Well, I love that, and just as an aside, this, with that UDOT or the legislative commitment and then the money through UDOT, that's probably why you don't sue UDOT. Or, just to
I represent
maybe dig a couple other cities that are
I represent a couple cities that have done that. I'm just saying, I'm glad. Regardless of where people might sit on that issue, anyway,
Yeah.
we'll deal with what everybody feels they need. So anyway, that's one about trails. Tim talked to me about, and without going into a lot of specifics just yet, streetscaping along Fort Union and 2300 and possible the town center area and improvements in that area. He talked to me about some public safety monies for assistant, helping with traction control in the canyons. And he indicated he had conversations with Carlos, the governor, was not supportive of opening that door. It's ongoing money of a couple $100,000 a year, maybe, and if you involved other jurisdictions, primarily, it would probably be Allen Heights and Sandy would be the two cities. But if it was 300,000 or 400,000, I've spoken with Senator Nicole more specifically about that. And we have some Tim represented that Carlos was 100% on board. And so if the executive director of UDOT gets discretion to spend that money, and then he says, no, then that might be a problem, okay? But we are not going, I think it will be very, very challenging to go to the legislature and say, we want state money statutorily dedicated for this purpose, okay? If the director has executive discretion and he's willing to do that, I think we have a creative way to get him that discretion.
Oh.
And so,
I'd like to know more about that. So yeah, maybe.
yeah, I'd be happy to share it with you all individually. I just candidly, I don't usually like to share my legislative strategy because when everybody listens to it, then everybody has the same strategy. And the next thing you know, our hopes of getting $200,000, we might end up with $20,000. So,
Yeah, great.
yeah, that's just,
Great.
that's the
In
legislative.
specific,
process.
I know you mentioned streetscaping. One of the things that I want to make sure is really clear with this specific town center
Yes.
is I know there's money dedicated to town centers that, I've had discussions with WFRC and that's something that they think is going to happen even more and more. So town center grants, anything to do with their town center. And then from what I've told, there's money specific to underground parking on the state level.
There's
Anyway.
not been grants. There
Okay.
have been some low interest loans through the SIB.
Okay,
Okay, this SIB stands for the State Infrastructure Bank. There's currently, there's currently $7 million in there, and UDOT sits on that fund and they control that, and you can borrow the funds at a rate not to exceed 50 basis points over the state's AAA credit borrowing rate, and there's no issuance cost. So for example, if you went to issue a $7 million bond, it would probably cost you $500,000 just to issue the bond. With UDOT, if you borrowed $7 million from the SIB, it costs you absolutely nothing. It's just that 50 basis points higher. So I know jurisdictions, Big Bill has used that. Sandy City has used that. The town of Vineyard has an SIB loan.
development community doesn't get access to it at all.
Well, they do, not directly, no, UDOT only loans to political subdivisions. Some of the municipalities I know have borrowed with the idea that the development community,
Pays them back.
then the city, they look at the city and say, we'll loan it to you. If you want to loan it to the development community,
Got it.
that's up to you.
Okay.
We're looking to you for repayment. Then that just takes them out of that whole thing. That's one of the reasons they find it so easy. Is the Salt Lake City did one, and UDOT puts a term in there that says, if you don't pay, we just withhold your BNC road money. Okay, and Salt Lake City said, well, we won't sign it, and UDOT said, we don't care, okay, don't borrow the money then. They fought about it for almost 6 months, and then the loan was gonna, you have to close it within 6 months after it's approved by the commission, and it was gonna go stale. And I finally was persuaded Salt Lake City to say, guys, you're not gonna win this argument. They really don't care if you borrow this. They really don't. And I said, so just don't plan on defaulting or they'll take it out of your B and C road fund. So, but they use that to help a developer with a multifamily house. And so, things like that, there's currently $7 million in the SIB fund. So if you had a developer that was looking at doing either a wrap product or a podium style product and the challenge they have is they just say the numbers don't pencil to build parking structures for a lot of them. They say we need a lower interest loan to capitalize that $25,000 to $30,000 parking structure. So I'm not aware.
Okay,
I am not aware of any grants.
anything on the federal level, maybe?
Maybe, usually if they're going to grant the money, there has to be a public use associated with it.
Got one.
So if you were building a parking structure for public building, then they would possibly say, maybe we could look at granting. But if it's passed through and the developer's building it in a for-profit type thing, they say, we're not granting that money,
So this hillside project has a definite 2 to 3 acre public. It will, yeah, whether it's open space, empathy or something, but whether it's a building, but so if there's were state parking available for that, that would be really, really something we want. Yeah.
One of the things there is out by the Southtown Mall, or not mall, Southtown Expo Center. There's a parking structure immediately to the west side that was built. And when that was done, there was a lease entered into between the city, the developer, and the county in regards to that structure. And the county paid up front to have the rights to park for the shows when they oversell, to park there and shuttle people over to the Southtown Expo. And that was capitalized, but there was a public benefit directly associated with it.
Oh, okay.
And then it was for a percentage of the parking structure, and I can't really remember the specifics, but the county has use of that on Friday night, Ollie Saturday, Ollie Sunday, I believe. So anyway, there was an economic decision as to what that was valued. But that is what it would require. It'd have to be a dedicated public use and what the value of that would be.
And that could be applied to either underground parking or stacked parking.
Yes. And then the last one was talked about ground for money to purchase ground at the gravel pit for a gathering center. I'm going to refer to as a
Gateway project.
a gateway project. And I didn't get a lot of specifics on that, so I was literally talking with Senator Colmore right before I drove out here, and I said, I need a little bit more specifics. I mean, how much is the, is there a seller willing to sell? Is there a purchase contract? Has there been appraisals? Anything? It's tough to go ask legislators. I need some money for the ground purchase. I don't really know how much ground, and I don't have an appraisal. And they're going to just look at me and say, hey, thanks for your time. Don't come back.
Yeah, so it wasn't really more a city ask.
Okay.
So there's probably some confusion there. It was more a request that the state look
Okay.
into. This would be a perfect opportunity for the state to introduce people to the Wasatch Mountains.
All right.
And that land will not exist for long
That helps a
for
lot.
that
I thought-
purpose.
I thought the way it was explained to me, I was like, guys, I can't do a appropriation request for, and so, because UDOT,
Tourism thing.
yeah, well, UDOT there's a lot of money floating around. UDOT always wants, they don't have money. Okay, there is a lot of money floating around, and I don't know if UDOT has made a decision. The litigation in regards to the gondola and other things there is kind of put UDOT in an awkward position where they're saying, well, we're willing to still plan. but we're not really sure how much we can actually do. Okay, because if it's inside the environmental document, you run the risk that people would say, well, do we have to get something enjoining you from doing anything? Or they started on the legacy highway, they got the environmental document, they started, then they were sued and enjoined. And UDOT, and I was serving in the legislature at the time, paid tens of millions of dollars to the contractor to deploy and then take it all away. And UDOT is afraid, and rightfully so, and saying, we're not going to deploy and do anything. And at least until there's some kind of a understanding between the plaintiffs and UDOT. And I don't know if they're actively pursuing. There are ways to do that. You could easily stipulate in accordance, because I don't think anybody objects to having a mobility hub and better transportation, and whether it's vehicles or buses accessing the canyon. I think it's the work in the canyon that whether seems to be a split. There's definitely strong opposition to the gondola. There's definitely a split in regards to even snow sheds. Okay, there are some members of the plaintiffs groups that don't feel like putting snow sheds in Little Cottonwood Canyon is an acceptable expense, because that'll be very disruptive to the environment also.
Greg, interesting enough, we met with UDOT today,
Okay,
and they don't think there's any chance of moving forward because the plaintiff's actions actually include objections to phase one, which is the mobility hub. So,
okay. So-
which I was shocked at, because everybody that I've talked with is for phase one.
Well, I think I mean, one of the things I interpreted in this meeting this morning, you're alluding to, was that the three different entities that are suing are opposed to the record of decision.
Right.
And because the entirety of the record of decision includes phase 1, 2, and 3, right? I mean,
yeah, but I
it was-
asked if the plaintiffs would be willing to carve out phase one and
That's
just
right,
do 2 and 3, and they said, no, there are actually items that are against phase one
Okay, see, so.
included in the lawsuit. So anyway. yeah.
Well, and so the only way, and that's, you have more current information, because my last conversation with them was probably a couple of weeks ago. And I asked them and they said, we're still analyzing the lawsuits. Because the last lawsuit, I think the first one came in and then the last one was from Sandy City and Salt Lake City on the water issues. And they said, we're still analyzing the lawsuits. Yeah. And so if they've now made that decision, I don't really understand the value in spending more design dollars until you resolve that.
And they're-
I mean,
they're
that's
basically
not my
not-
decision. It's, why would you spend a lot of money?
They might be willing to purchase the property. They're not willing to go any further than that.
Yeah, purchasing, yeah,
Yeah, that's probably the most important piece, right, is getting the property reserved.
yeah.
So if you can do that much, at least you've got it held so that you've got, when the litigation is settled, you've got something to move forward with.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm gonna leave this up to attorneys like Shane that are much brighter than me. Okay. I'm dragging you into this, but, I mean, where UDOT does an environmental study on some private property owner's land, and then there's litigation that doesn't involve the private property owner, I'm not sure the private property owner is gonna say, well, I'm comfortable sitting there and watching this for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
I won't do anything with my property, because environmental litigation, Legacy Highway was 7 or 8 years in the making before it was settled. 114th South was 7 or 8 years in the making before it was settled. Provo Canyon was decades in the litigation. And I mean, and so, and I just have a hard time imagining, I don't know. I don't know, I have any idea. I guess they just keep pulling gravel out of there. Pretty soon there won't be a mountain left. I don't know what they do.
Well, I think what happens is we don't move on it, the developer just sells it to somebody else and we lose the opportunity.
Yeah.
There's nothing to preclude the developer from selling that land.
Yeah.
So regardless of what happens, and I don't know what chunk of land UDOT was, whether they needed more than 5 acres to build their 2,500 stack parking.
13 acres.
Was 13 acres. So what would be the avenue, so before we really talk about the plausibility, but to, as the mayor was saying, make this a state driven, like that the state of Utah says, based on tourism, year-round tourism of people coming in from out of state as well as from the immediate region who want to hike on the trails and realize the beauty and all of that we want to create a gateway. I mean,
Well,
we won't take a lot of time to get into all the details, but in the state having the desire to purchase, 10 acres, even if UDOT hasn't, whether they move ahead or not with the intermodal hub, is there any?
Especially if it sounds like there's monies available for that possibly.
well, we would probably have to change the statute on some of the uses set aside for the Cottonwood Canyons fund. Okay, that fund was set aside by Senator Scalvor. It's $20 million a year.
So the property would be in Cottonwood Heights currently.
Right, yeah, the property's in Cottonwood Heights, but UDOT is probably not the right entity, even if we change that to be used.
Okay,
And the funds out of the Cottonwood Canyons Fund. We need to engage the Office of Tourism and it's not Vicky anymore. She retired, didn't she?
Yeah, I don't know who it is.
I think it's.
could you guys facilitate a meeting with them? We'd
Yeah.
love to do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Office of
it's
Tourism,
too bad it's not big.
yeah.
We all don't love her.
But somebody like that, because UDOT's gonna look at it and say, yeah, not our silo, not our bailiwick. And if we tell them, well, we know we appreciate that, we might borrow some of your money to do it, but maybe not borrow because we don't want to pay it back. But we might take some of your money to try and do that. But we need to vision this with the Department of Tourism so that they're an advocate for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Something, down in, I think the Cottonwood Canyon see nearly as many visitors every year, probably maybe even more than you actually see in Zion's National Park. Okay, I mean, you think about the millions of people that are streaming up and down these canyons, winter and summer. You drive up the canyon on a Friday, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but you drive up there on a Friday evening or a Saturday, it's bumper to bumper traffic all around. And so we say, let's try and do something like a what they call it, Greater Zion Gateway and stuff like that, and some of that. But we need to probably envision that a little bit more. Start with the Office of Tourism, I think, would be the candidate. But
That makes sense.
and then changing the uses, because that Cottonwood Canyons Fund, they appropriated I think 150 plus last year with the idea that they could either start doing something that wasn't litigation. I don't know why UDOT acts like they're the only ones surprised at litigation.
Yeah.
I think my sixth grade grandchild.
Yeah,
So, I don't know why they act surprised, but anyway, so there's money out there.
kind of what I said to them this morning. And the use would be controlled by us though, right? We'd be able to change the use.
Well, yes, well, the challenge is as long as a private property person owns it, the use is still controlled by you. The moment the state buys it, they're willing to come and meet with you and talk about their vision.
Oh, got it.
But it's like the point. I mean, there are some municipalities that are somewhat frustrated because when the state is not subject to local zoning laws.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, but I don't think that they would go try and have a vision of saying, if we could talk to them and saying, support our vision to have some kind of a Greater Cottonwood Canyons tourist center, kick off. I mean, and even if it's, I think if the American Fork, the National Park Service has a visitor center that you stop in and to get you have to buy a pass to hike up the Timpanogos Cave, but they have maps of the canyon and other hikes and everything else. And it's a great resource and something like that. And I hope that's kind of what you're.
Well, and just really quickly, if you've ever been to the Tucson Sonoran Desert Museum, they call it. It's on the outskirts of Tucson. And it is this incredible multi-acre sloping area, and they have free flight bird shows. So, there's 200 people standing and the birds of prey go swooping over your head. And then there's all this about the indigenous, the native species and animals. And I found it electrifying. And And I thought, wow, where better than at the mouth of the Cotton Canyon to do something that the state could say. I mean, it would be like the best of the Red Butte Arboretum and the best that Hogle Zoo ever did, and just elements that make people, want to bring their family anyways, it would. be
Now,
exciting.
one of the things would be is we need to meet with the Office of Tourism and talk about it, because, and start visioning with them. I honestly think for this session, I'm gonna just be honest with you. I don't know if this one's, baked enough, to get to do. I mean, I've got some pretty good ideas on the 2300 and Fort Union and some streetscaping there. There is some SIB money if you're looking there. Some good ideas on the public safety monies. I've talked to Senator Roma. This one, I mean, but we will facilitate, we'll reach out. I think my recollection, and I shouldn't go off recollection because I'm getting older, but I think it's Donna Law is the new
That sounds right.
tourism. And she's also, if it is her, she's also a member of the Transportation Commission. And so,
Yeah, let's start with the
meeting
meeting.
and talk about the vision.
That'd be great.
You did have some money set aside for the parking structure, and that's still there.
Yeah, that's still there. UDOT still
And
there.
it's,
Yeah.
and so this is an add-on, right? That's just wanted to, it's an add-on to that.
Yeah.
For this, which I think would be amazing.
Well, I have to definitely mention to our lobbyists, that, a concern in Cottonwood Heights is the drive-through traffic, both the commuters trying to get from I-215 south into Sandy and Draper where they live. And that's year round, that's Monday through Friday. And then the other is the canyon recreationalists trying to get to Big and Little Cotton Canyon. And so I'm interested to know whether, there's anything afoot to, with urging UTA or UTA and UDOT to work together to get more of a vision for better transportation alternatives. So I'm probably referencing a transit, bus rapid transit, things that would allow both commuters that are trying to get in our case, many of the people that live along this east bench are trying to get up to the East Bench Cultural District, the University of Utah Research Park, all the hospitals there, the cultural offerings. And I think there's some movement afoot with Dan Dugan, Salt Lake City Council member, who wants to alleviate the Foothill Drive traffic, much of which are our vehicles coming up there. And so is there anything that you hear of or any suggestions you have to affect a better vision or put more pressure on the Board of Trustees, to think about how to move commuters using existing arterials, collectors, and our I-15 and 215 beltway? Because as you know, right now, we don't use that at all, not certainly for rail. It's a missed opportunity, like you were saying, that was never planned to go along the perimeters of our major interstates. But there is still bus rapid transit, and it's being implemented north of us in the Ogden area and south of us in the Provo area, and yet in Salt Lake County, we're behind on that. Any comments on that?
Well, as I am not personally aware of anything. I don't know exactly if there was even any study of that. Over the years, it's really kind of interesting because we're going back 6 years now from when Wayne Niederhauser was president of the Senate, and there was I want to say close to $100 million, maybe $80 million. It was for canyon improvements, and they were talking about doing Wasatch Boulevard, and and they called it recreation money, recreation access money, and I worked with him on getting that money, and literally and then last year there was over I want to say $150 million more, and literally nothing's been done. I mean, I lived up there. First of all, I'd probably move, but I mean, because nothing's been done. There's been a lot of money put out there, and this environmental document they did took them forever, and they finally got that done, and then there'll be some litigation. Candidly, there might be approaches of saying, guys, you have $20 million a year, even if it's not enough. They can't build a bus rapid transit because that involves doing construction, which would be inside of the now environmental document. So they won't do a BRT, but if you said, yes, you could certainly run an express bus. I mean, but we need to find a place for them to park, because the only parking, if you're trying to go up to Wasatch Boulevard and park in the wintertime to take a bus anywhere but the ski resorts, you're competing with, you got a little tiny one at the
Well,
at the mouth there, and then you got the one at the top of Creek Road. That's about it.
Well, but this is an important distinction that, and I know we don't have a whole lot more time to talk about this, but we already have Highland Drive. Highland Drive has 2 lanes in each direction, and we could have express buses that run from an existing park and ride at 9400 South and Highland. And that would be a great collector. It's a great epicenter. If you drew a circle around it, there are, thousands of residents who I could get there in 3 or 4 minutes from my house. And run it up Highland onto the I-215. This whole emphasis that it has to be on Wasatch Boulevard, why? These residents live well to the west of Wasatch Boulevard. Why are we directing them to drive east to get up on the Wasatch, go north, and then drop to the west to get down onto the I-215?
Yeah.
So I think this is super important for Cottonwood Heights to use existing roadways in a more viable way to move people instead of only thinking of moving cars.
Well, candidly, I mean, you're talking to someone that rode the express bus to the University of Utah for most of my postgraduate work. But the thing that I liked about it is I got on it at 13th East, and it didn't stop until it was in front of the University of Utah.
Well, and that's the very thing. We have we have executives at ARUP who live in Cottonwood Heights. I've tried riding the bus. My 20-minute drive turned into an hour and 50 minutes each way. So we don't have what you just described anymore.
Right.
For anywhere here from Draper, Sandy, the east side.
We don't have enough time or patience
Yeah.
for me to talk about UTA and the.
Well, and I only am just interested
No, we're-
because you're in the heart of the state legislature, and I'm always interested in getting, what possibilities there can be.
I'll tell you that I've gone down this road with UTA multiple times. And, I've talked to him about light rail along Foothill and Wasatch. I mean, getting it across Parliament is a big deal. I've talked to him about bus rapid transit down Highland. And their sense that what they tell me all the time is there's no demand. They've actually cut bus service on the east side.
Yeah, that's because no one will ride it because it's not viable. Working class people have to get
That's
somewhere.
kind of what I tell them.
Okay.
So
I have-
thank you.
I have a
Thanks so much.
trust me, I have a renter right now. She goes to StubHub at Draper. Takes her over an hour on the bus to get there. It's terrible.
All right, did you have one other thing?
I was gonna say, no, I'm gonna say I am meeting with, I've been asked if I would sit down and meet with the director of UTA, Mr. Fox. I said, happy to do that. I mean, they have a very, very viable service. They made a conscientious decision when fixed rail was put in, that they were gonna try and force everybody to fixed rail, to ride fixed rail, so that they could increase ridership. Well, a lot of those express buses, they used to stream downtown to the downtown core or to the University of Utah, they did away with. And it's forced people back into their cars versus staying on an express bus because they don't want that
They don't
hour
want
and
to
15.
transfer.
They don't want that hour and 15, even if you're not transferred, they don't want to stopping every
There's
quarter of
no
a mile.
way for workers to get where they need to go without transferring at least once or twice. And most people will only maybe transfer once. The whole thing about, you should be able to get on, do your reading, and then the doors open and you can get on. But this idea that people are gonna go way out of their way and transfer, anyway.
So, okay,
Well,
we're
I'm
on
glad
the
we
same
keep it
page.
So very last
Share
item,
your
have you all seen our legislative policies?
I have not.
Our legislative, so basically it's a document, I think it's on our website. I'll double check that it is if you don't have it. And I'll just briefly, I just want to go over a couple of highlights. We've put in bullet points that we hope the legislature will respect the traditional role of local government. Respecting every city is unique, and a one-size-fits-all approach does not address community challenges. Imposing an unfunded or unworkable mandate on cities may not be the best effective policy-making approach. We've listed some funding priorities, Big and Little Cottonwood Canyon transportation and tourism. We mentioned that. Providing additional funding for the transit hub. Active transportation roadway improvement funding is a big highlight of ours to try to get funds for. Public safety, mental health funding is something that we've listed as a priority. Policy considerations, we've listed remove city restrictions on short-term rentals. You all probably know how we feel on those. Maintain the current sales tax distribution. We feel the 50-50 distribution formula is fair. Provide option to enhance sales tax distribution amount to municipalities, give us more money somehow. And transportation policies for canyons. So implementing policies will give the state adequate implementation busing for big and little cotton canyons. So anyway, if you don't have this document, we'll get it to you.
Hey, Mayor, I've got one thing for you. Greg, both of you, sorry I'm not there to harass you in person.
Oh my goodness, who is
I'm
that?
at home with the flu. Greg, did you mention the Office of Tourism earlier? Did you mention things that we could leverage out of them or no?
Yes.
Yes, we kind of talked about that and getting them involved to try and work. We didn't talk specifically about what we talked about the other night at the fundraiser. We talked, Councilmember Holton and I spoke about the old mill and doing something with that. But we did talk about a tourism approach.
So one thing of note there. So Natalie Randall is taking Vicky Varella's spot.
Oh, it's Natalie. Okay.
It's Natalie Randall, and she starts, I believe, sometime next month. She's a great friend, and she happens to be a resident of Cottonwood Heights. So she moved from San Juan County up here to Cottonwood Heights.
Good.
So we should figure out how to
Leverage the heck out of that, Matt.
Yeah.
It's good to meet you.
You and Greg need to do it together. Awesome.
Okay, thanks.
So I apologize, Matt. I meant to mention, it was on my list to mention that you were ill. I didn't know for sure if you were coming
No,
or
you're
not.
totally fine. Sorry for not being there, y'all.
No, good. Thanks for not getting us sick.
No, so it sounds like your council member probably, yeah, so it's not a law, the person that I was thinking of. So
Yeah.
I knew Vicky Burrell had left, so Natalie Randall, I don't know her, but let's leverage Councilmember Holt and set up a meeting and I think she'll catch the vision as fast as anybody if she loves to now.
Well, thanks, guys. If you're like us, we hope the next 6 weeks goes like this fast and that we don't have any major issues.
You and me both.
We know that's not gonna happen. So a long 6 weeks. ahead.
fun out of it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys. Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, we have 7 different staff reports, so we're gonna move on quickly. The first one is item 4A, which is a discussion on a Wasatch Trailhead concept for the Bonneville Shoreline Trail. So we have our Community and Economic Development Director, Mike Johnson, who's gonna lead this for us for a few minutes. So
Thank you, Mayor.
thanks, Mike.
Try to make up some time here too on some of these presentations.
I think we're doing okay. I mean,
Okay.
I don't think we're too far behind.
So the property we're talking about here is it's circled in blue here. It's at the very southeast limit of the city across from the Granite Oaks development up on North Little Cottonwood Road. The mouth of Little Cottonwood Canyon is just out of view to if you going to the right here. The city, you will recall, purchased this in partnership with the fundraising effort by Utah Open Lands. I think we closed on this in 2020 or right around there. And then a conservation easement was placed on it to prevent any future private development from happening. Around the same time, the city was working on a Bonneville Shoreline Trail Access Master Plan, which was adopted. These dates are loose, but in 2019 or 2020. And it identifies this property as what was defined as a secondary Bonneville Shoreline Trail access point, which means we identified some regional access points, one being Ferguson Park and the large parking lot there. You know, that's a type of access that has substantial parking, restrooms, other typical trailhead amenities for those large regional trailheads. Another one of those was identified in the future gravel pit development. And then there were some secondary access points defined, this one, and then one up the mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon a little ways on a Forest Service lot. And the idea of a secondary access point is there would be some parking, not too much, very minimal amenities, you know, maybe some signage and some trash cans, but not full restrooms or anything like that. And then the plan went on to identify local access points, which did not have parking. They were generally accessed within the East Bench neighborhoods. So this fell in the category of secondary access, which was that kind of middle ground of some parking, but not too much disturbance, you know, minimal amenities. connecting to the future Bonneville Shoreline Trail. That background is important because it came into play during the EIS with UDOT and then later with a resolution by the council. The reason we pursued this project and adopted Resolution 2023-10, which was just a contract agreement for a concept design, is that in the EIS and in the section of the EIS that contemplates improvements on Wasatch Boulevard and North Little Cottonwood Canyon Road, there was a shared use path that connected basically Little Cottonwood Canyon to Big Cottonwood Canyon via a separated shared use path, separate from the roadway, protected, something that could be a really great amenity connecting canyon to canyon along this area. However, UDOT, make the story shorter, UDOT left this property out of it because of the conservation easement on it there and some sensitivity regarding that. What they communicated to us is if the city has a plan in place that's been reviewed and documented as being discussed in a public meeting, it's an official plan, then they would happily add that back in, knowing that it's been publicly vetted, supported by Utah Open Lands, the city council, and it's been shown in the public. That was the purpose of the resolution, to do a concept design. We're not necessarily looking to implement immediately. That would be a council priority on whether and when to move forward with any implementation for the actual trailhead improvements. But what these concepts do show is a shared use path that we want to be included as part of the EIS. Understanding now there's litigation that pauses some of that, but
I imagine there's grants even for concept and design. Are we actively pursuing it?
the concept and design was, we could manage this with the budget we had in place at the time. It's already been paid. For implementation or even partial implementation, yes, there are grants for taking this to the next steps, whether that's engineering and construction documents or actual construction.
Can you tell me
of the
again
trail.
exactly where we are?
Yeah, so actually this is the very southeast limit of the city. This is the Granite Oak subdivision. Giverny is, you can see it
Okay.
right up in this corner here. This is the high T is probably, just out of the screen there up at the top. So this is where Wasatch becomes a city-owned road and North Little Cottonwood Canyon splits and heads
Okay.
up to Little Cottonwood Canyon. This is the Salt Lake City-owned property with the water tank on it.
So the Golden Hills neighborhood, Alphen Way,
Yeah,
is that even the street for Alphen Way, or is it a little?
no, I think it's a little higher, but the homes are right here.
Yeah, because you're past the high T.
Yeah, this is like a cul-de-sac here with some homes on it. So we're right at the southern limit of the city. Actually, this is important for this conversation. The proposed entrance to where the gondola station would be is like right across, right in that square
Right across
area
the
there.
street.
Yep. So that's the context. These concepts I'm about to show have been reviewed and kind of narrowed down by the Parks, Trails and Open Space Committee. So I'm showing you what they have recommended, and it's two options. You don't have to really pick one because I can flip back and forth. You can see they're very similar. One just limits disturbance, and one lines up a little better with the future gondola access road. The options that are not shown here, which were eliminated by the Parks, Trails and Open Space Committee, were for a more substantial parking lot, so more stalls, some more amenities, and that was found to not be quite as in compliance with the master plan. So this is, as I stated, very conceptual in nature, but basically what it shows is just a cul-de-sac with a turnaround and I think there's 10 or 12 parking stalls there, not a ton of parking. Access here, a shade pavilion. These are just examples. Trail kiosk, bike repair station. Obviously, then the trail itself would wind up through the hill up to that future Bonneville Shoreline Trail connection point, which is way up the mountain to the east. And then it's a little harder to see on here, but that shared use path along Wasatch Boulevard would come, right down through here, through the site. So the parking was designed in a way to get clear of any space UDOT would need to implement that. I'll show this.
One of the you've already stated that the reason to advance this, even though the Bonneville Shoreline Trail is barely at
Yeah.
die right now, was to make sure that we were in position for when the phase one, which would be the expansion of Wasatch Boulevard and the multi-use. It come along here, so shouldn't it appear in this diagram?
Yeah, it's in here. It's just, this isn't a color diagram. And I think based on this feedback, we can go and refine that further and make sure it's very crystal clear and labeled.
You know, I kind of sort of see something here, but then I don't know what that line.
I
what's
think
that
what
line?
it's supposed to be here, this is an easement line or something, or it could be a scan line. It's along here and that does, this is a good comment. It does need to be a little bit more refined and clarified on there. Probably labeled as shared use path. And that's something that we would definitely do.
Well, and you're done. please
Yeah.
let me know.
The difference between option A and B, option A here uses where the existing pullout area is. When you go up to that property, there's a little gravel informal lot that you usually see 1 or 2 cars parked on. This dotted line right here it's kind of a pathway that's already there. If you've been on this property, there's kind of a pathway worn in, and you usually see a few people on it. It just kind of starts here and ends, a half a mile or so to the south, but that's shown there for context. So the whole parking facility would be developed west of where that existing, or I guess southwest of where that existing trail is. Option B would be building a brand new intersection alignment that would align more closely with where the gondola entrance was shown on EIS documents across the street, again, with the shared use path coming through
And which
here.
one is more disturbance to the natural
I think
environment?
option B is a little bit more. There were some really initial, price estimates. They're both under $1 million. I think one was 700,000, one was 800,000. Option B requires slightly more retaining and grading.
And we don't have funding for that yet.
No, we don't. But when we signed the contract, the idea wasn't go right into implementation. We don't have a trail up here, so we don't want to go and build all this, this trail connection to a trail that doesn't exist, but this just kind of sets the stage for that.
But having the design would make UDOT not get rid of our conservation easement.
Well, it would have them add, they just avoided these properties because of the easement. It would just add this back into that future shared use path alignment, and then they would build it instead of us having to go find funding to build the trail as well.
So I do want to add an opinion that I know Councilmember Burrell's not gonna like, and maybe even PTOS, but I do struggle a little bit with, so if we have 10 or 12 parking stalls and more people, sometimes a family goes to park and they take up 4 or 5 with a big group of people that come. And so basically when that lot's full, and especially when you're coming from a further distance and you can't walk or ride, then people are gonna be parking out on Little Cottonwood Road, on shoulders, or spilling into neighborhoods. And so, we get a lot of complaints already from people parking in neighborhoods at trailheads. And so, to me, the easier solution would be to hide the parking with vegetation and trees from the roadway. But otherwise, you're limiting, you're making a trailhead that very, very few people can access at one time. So I struggle a little bit with this. Even though looks like that's what the recommendation was from PTOS.
It was, yeah, and we have concepts that show a bigger parking facility that just wasn't, recommended as moving forward, so.
Well, if I may give the contrasting point of view, I think that in Cottonwood Heights, we have such an opportunity to not only become a place where people want to come for the aesthetic, for the mental release, for the recreation, and to litter the east bench of Cottonwood Heights with parking lots, in my opinion, is short-term and misguided, because we have an opportunity to create a vision, and we can do this with both Sandy to our south and Holiday to our north, where there is a shuttle system that at peak times, you can leave your vehicles, you can get to, if you need to get to parking, but that there are shuttles that we look at ways to phase in a electric trolley type system that could not only serve hikers and recreationalists, but encourage people to circulate on foot. We know that our local businesses get more patronage when people get out of their cars. And so eventually, I think it should start with along the Wasatch front here between Bells Canyon and Hughes Canyon and the trailheads there, where people can arrive on a shuttle. Like, to me, this design should be a pull in, pull out for a shuttle. And feature a shuttle versus feature and encourage people to drive their individual.
And Ellen,
cars. Eventually have it go all the way to Port Union Boulevard, out into Midvale to the track
Could I
station.
just add, until that's in place, if that ever gets put in place, we can always shrink a parking lot. But until something like that's in place, which is a little myopic, at least today, then less people can come and enjoy the trailhead at Bonneville.
Well, I would,
But anyway, let's listen to Matt. Matt has an opinion too.
no, I was going to ask Ellen a question about who operates that, but to your point, Mayor, I think one of my biggest frustrations as a resident of Cottonwood Heights is, as I try to go up to these areas with such small kids, we can't ride our bikes up there. It really is a drive there, get out and go enjoy the trails. And it is so frustrating in my own city when I can't even go enjoy those because there's no place for me to park safely with my kids. And I've gone to places where I try to park, if it's on the curb or you try to find a spot, and I'm looking to see if there's an open spot when a car's not zooming by for me to open my door because all of the safe parking was gone. And for my thing is people are parking there anyway, but it's creating a very, very unsafe environment. And I do worry that if we do limit parking to such a small amount that we continue to invest in areas for people to enjoy, but we're not able to actually provide opportunities for people with young families to do it safely.
well, again, I would remind the council that every parking stall, when you talk about the cost of the value of the property, the building and the maintenance and all that goes with it, is about $30,000 per parking stall. If we were to create a vision, and this is our perfect time with our general plan in an update, a plan for Cottonwood Heights that shows that we can shuttle and encourage people to take shuttles. You can take your family on a shuttle. You don't have to drive your private vehicle and park and do these things in the fashion
Yes,
that we, and
and
so.
who
So
operates
the more
that
we
shuttle?
build parking lots, it is a statistically proven thing. It encourages more cars on our roadways. Vehicular violence is already one of our challenges in Cottonwood Heights. So we need to get beyond the conventions that have been used and are proven to put, again, more cars on our roadways, create more danger for children, adults, for everyone. You're far safer on a bus or a shuttle than you are in your own private vehicle. So, we're not going to solve this in a 10-minute deliberation. But I really think that this is misguided to continue to build more and more parking lots. For goodness sakes, UDOT wants to build a 2,500 parking stall garage across the street from this. I mean, what is it we want for Cottonwood Heights? Do we want it just to be a place where cars are driving as fast as they can to get to their next spot? Or do we want to have camaraderie? Transit brings camaraderie and mental well-being. This idea of everybody driving their own private vehicle everywhere, it is financially not sustainable. Anyways.
So Mike, this is the.
This was the original one. This was not refined because this didn't make it past the PTOS scope, but this is an example of what a larger parking lot would look like. It's basically, 2 or 3 times the number in the small options that were shown.
Hey, Ellen.
More parking and a shuttle. I mean, that 30 stalls is not that much greater than 12. And I can't justify spending so much money without me as a resident being able to go up there and access it. That's what Matt's frustration is very valid. I get so frustrated that I live here and I can't access my own canyons. And so there is room for a shuttle there. There's room for both, and that's not excessive. That's not 2,500 stalls.
So that is an in and an out. Yeah, it has an entrance and an exit, right?
Yeah, for context, I think Ferguson Park has like 55 stalls, something like that, 50.
What is,
I don't find that excessive right there.
what does, Bill's Canyon have? Do you have any idea?
Oh, I don't know. They have 2. They have a smaller lot. That's probably the one up in Sandy, probably 20 stalls. And then they have a larger one that's in the mouth of the canyon.
So I don't want to discount. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, in looking at the future, if they're gonna build that enormous parking structure across the street, we have to think about that safety of pedestrians crossing the road there as well.
Sure.
And anything that we consider here,
Yeah,
because they're gonna do it. Lot's gonna get full, especially if we have a smaller lot, and you're gonna get people.
To the
running.
trailhead, 2,500 parking stalls.
No, I said if people are parking there and
Oh.
the parking lot is full at the trailhead, people are gonna park in that structure and run across the
and then
street.
across the
That's what we were
street.
doing at Big Cotton Canyon.
Yeah, so
Right
yeah,
across the
so we have to
street and then
consider
running across the
something as
street.
far as safety.
So I don't want
Bad.
to discount
Mhm.
Councilmember Burrell's feelings and thoughts, and I think a lot of what she said is really, really valid. The issue to me is, you know, when that's in place, we can always shrink a parking lot. You know, we can easily, Matt, you could get in one of your little trucks, I'm sure, and take out some asphalt pretty easily. Anyway, but if we limit this to 10, 12 spots at a trailhead like the Bonneville shoreline, that we hope is eventually great. Boy, to me, it's telling people we don't want anybody coming to enjoy it other than our residents that live close.
Just don't think this I think this has actually elements of your vision and the others, the vision, when there's only 30 stalls. This isn't 200 stalls. It's not this ginormous, but it's big enough that enough people can access that, and then you can have shuttles too at a future point.
So Mike, would this be worthy of going back to PTOS? Cause I maybe even a presentation to PTOS of how the council feels. I don't,
Sure.
tell me what.
Yeah,
you
we
think.
can, they have a meeting next week. We can bring it up then and,
Okay.
you know, see if this is something that they would support. You can see this one still, you know, there's not a lot of amenities here. It's just like, you know, three of the other options. It's still got that pedestrian trail. that's kind of
Aesthetically, you
informal.
could easily hide most of it with trees.
I mean,
You know,
can't you make
bushes.
some of that a little bit wider for a shuttle pullout to be able to come and be there? So that's a
But
future.
one of the realities is
Consideration too.
when you provide all this parking and you encourage people to drive, then transit fails. So we either as a
Transit has to be in
city,
place first.
we either as a
Yeah, I
city
agree.
say that we embrace a walkability for our city, which has come out in our surveys, that's what people want. So we continue to cling on to this car-centric model, even though our residents tell us overwhelmingly that they want transit alternatives, they want transportation alternatives, they want walkability. You don't get walkability when you focus on building parking lots and wider
We
roads.
still have density for that yet. And as our density increases, I see your vision. I.
The Bonneville Shoreline Trail would be a walkable trail for
But how do I get there?
thousands.
That's
of
not
people.
walkability. Walkability refers to when people, they walk for, purposes, not, so the Bonneville Shoreline Trail is for recreation, which is wonderful. But if we really are going to embrace walkability for Cottonwood Heights, we need to understand that building more parking lots does not facilitate active transportation or walkability.
Okay, thank you.
There is another option where we could, because it's a concept and until it becomes a let's implement kind of direction by the council, we could design this as phased implementation where you have a smaller option that leads into a bigger option and they work together. You know, something we can look at as well.
Okay.
So I'll take it back to PTOS and then we can
Okay,
bring it back.
perfect. If you want me to come, I'm happy to.
It's the same night as the next town hall meeting, so it's
Okay.
the Hillside.
Somebody minutes,
Next
okay.
Wednesday.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Appreciate that discussion. Item B, 4B is a discussion on a proposed Tavachi annexation process. So as we know, Tavachi has submitted an annexation request to the city. We've accepted the request to come in to be analyzed. And so we're in the process where we didn't get any legal or anybody, what's the word I'm looking for?
Any protest. by
Any
any
protest,
qualified
right, so that
individual.
time has passed. And so now we are at, I guess, is that Mike, you're gonna cover this as well? You and Shane both are gonna cover what the process is from here, is that right?
Yeah,
Sure.
I've got some background information. Shane could probably tee up next steps.
Okay.
Well, the next steps, as Samir mentioned, we had the petition filed on October 2nd and October 17th. The council agreed to accept that petition for further consideration. It was checked over by the recorder and then she gave notice to the council of certification that it complied with the legal requirements on November 16th. And then we started the protest period that the mayor mentioned that ran until mid-December, we didn't have a protest. And so now, what's next? So before granting an annexation petition or denying it, the council has to hold a public hearing regarding the proposed annexation and then provide prior notice to the citizens of that public hearing. And then after the public hearing, the council votes to either grant or deny the petition for annexation via an ordinance. So I think I mentioned in a memo to you recently that the state law doesn't tell us how long after the annexation petition hearing occurs that the council has to make a decision. But I think that we can't let it go too stale. So my suggestion is within a couple of months, 2 to 3 months after the public hearing, it could be sooner, because the city council has to either grant or deny the petition for annexation. So that's kind of where we are. I think that Paul is prepared to, or already has noticed of the public hearing for the annexation. So that's about all I have.
Can I ask a couple of legal questions? Sure. Before we move on, or would it be better to have Mike go first?
Up to you.
So the consensus from many residents who are objecting to this is the concern about Cottonwood Heights having to take over maintenance and upkeep of the roads up into the Debauchee development. Currently, they're privately owned under by the HOA, I guess, correct? And so as we tell people, hey, they're owned by the HOA, one of the things that we've talked about recently is, well, what if that ever defaulted? What if the HOA decided not to pay taxes and do the things that they need to maintain it? And, one of the things that we've did with Timberline is we said, hey, look, even though we have a private public access
Even though we
easement,
own
private
the ground,
owned
you
by
have
the
an
city,
easement over it.
you still have to take care of it. And so I actually wonder if we could request that the HOA sign something that they would create if that ever happened, that they would create a tax service district that would then for that area to take care of the roads, so that, anyway, I know what we're saying. I just wonder what protections the city could have if eventually the HOA defaulted. I'm just trying to look in the future. Does that make sense at all, what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure.
So any thoughts?
Well, I think that
Could we require them to create a tax service district if they ever defaulted to maintain that road?
yeah, we could try to do that, and then we could try to impose that obligation on their properties via some sort of covenant that's recorded against all the properties. All of the owners of the property would have to agree to do that, but ultimately, the issue to me, having seen similar things over the years, is the argument that comes in, that will come in almost certainly is, hey, we're residents of the city, we're taxpayers in the city, why should we have to maintain our own road when everybody else doesn't? And so that becomes a political issue that it's hard to know what would happen at the time. So we could try to do something. I hadn't thought about, imposing this obligation that is triggered in the future by some sort of occurrence. And can certainly think about that some more and provide some advice, but ultimately, I think that the council at the times and every subsequent council is going to have that political issue to deal with from residents claiming they're not receiving a service that they should because they pay taxes.
Okay,
Another item that, did you have?
so we want to
something?
let Mike go, so I don't.
I can be really quick.
Let's do that.
Mine's a little more general. I do want to note that large red shape above Debauchee is also included in this. It's a 50-acre parcel owned by the same owner as the gravel pit. I don't know, and I have, no confirmation, but I do suspect that there, when the gravel pit development plans come, that there, if granted, all of this will somehow try to connect together, so
So
there's
wait,
some
that is
unknown with
currently unincorporated?
Mhm. Yeah, it sits up on the ridge. A lot of this is unbuildable hillside, you know, probably
Is
most.
that
of it.
included in the petition though?
Yeah, this red shape here is, yep.
Which I also didn't note that before, so that was alarming to me when I looked at the packet and realized that we're not just talking about Tabachi. We're talking about another 50 acres owned by the Walker Family Trust.
Yeah, again, largely, my opinion is largely a hillside that's probably not buildable at all. I don't know if it's better or worse for us to be the jurisdiction that would manage a development application. If we're not, then the county is, and you know, we have a little less say of any future development plan that impacts that. If we are, then we know what our ordinances are and what it will allow. But there's some uncertainty over what would happen there. Oh, yeah,
I was gonna say, one of my concerns is this single point of entry
yeah.
and the maintenance of that single point of entry. Isn't it a bridge? Do we want any kind of responsibility for a bridge? I'm with Matt on this. That can become.
Not shaking his head
Something
forward or sideways, I can't tell that.
That could be something that we're. Yeah,
So,
that could be really expensive.
it's currently owned by the HOA, correct?
Yeah. Things like that add up to a whole lot of money with, you know, these single incidents adding up over time. And that's a huge concern for me.
Yeah. So I agree. But that's one of the reasons my question was, if the HOA defaulted and couldn't handle it, if we could then covenant to tax the residents for the maintenance of the road and the bridge, that would alleviate that issue to me. That's where I was going with that, but I'm not trying to make Matt have a heart attack yet either, so.
The entry point here, you can see it's not in red because that's already our city limit.
So in the beginning, there was a second entry point.
Yeah,
correct? And why did that go away?
So this road here, it's actually got a number here, is currently on their subdivision plat as a secondary egress point. But if you go up there, this just drops straight off the side of the mountain right now. They've graded all of this out. So it's a sheer drop straight down. They are in the process with Salt Lake County of removing that secondary access point from their subdivision plat. And it's all been approved. It's been approved by everybody except for, I think, the water district. And I got an update on this last week. So they're still moving forward, to my best understanding, with removing that secondary access point. Of note is the fire department that would review that secondary egress is a fire code standard. That's unified fire. So, you know, same standard would apply whether county or city, but they have approved removal of that secondary access point. I don't know if that's to say they're gonna, you know, repropose a new connection point. That's part of this 50-acre piece when the gravel pit develops or not. But as it stands right now, the county has basically teed up for approval, formalizing the removal of that secondary access point. So it is just the one.
So Shane, could we approve with conditions?
Approve.
For example, hey, we're not gonna approve you without a secondary access point, whether it goes through the Shelby property or the Walker property or not. I mean, is that something that we could do?
I don't think there's anything in the code or anything that I have seen that allows us to approve an annexation with conditions attached to it. It's again, something that I would have to look at, but I have never heard of that before. And going back to your prior question, imposing a contractual obligation on the HOA to do something in the future is me a little bit dicey, because what is the HOA really? It's an asset.
Yeah, you'd have to go to
asset-less
individual
entity.
homes,
You
right?
you have to tie down every individual piece of property in the project, plus the Shelby property, and then there will be issues as to whether if that goes for a long time without having to enforce it, whether it goes stale and becomes unenforceable. So it's a little bit interesting.
Yeah, Chief, go ahead.
I agree that a secondary access is very important, but I don't mean to be the spider on the wedding cake, but something else to think about is that there's no one to service that area for police. Now, Unified Fire has an agreement that they, you know, send the closest engine and they will go up there. With the separation of UPD and the sheriff's office, they could service that using Mill Creek holiday cars or Canyon cars. They don't have that any longer. They won't have that any longer. If Cotton Heights doesn't, if they call for service, they're not in my city, I won't go. So I'm not sure how they will provide police services to that area with the breakup of the sheriff's office, unless they send a Canyon car. Otherwise, they'll have to send an unincorporated car, and I'm not sure if that comes from Granite West or White City or Kearns.
Do we not have interlocals where we have to respond at some point though?
You do on emergency situations, but that's not what we're talking about, the day-to-day patrol, proactive,
Got
you
it.
know, stuff, an alarm drop, anything like that. Who's gonna go? A Canyon car? Canyon cars go off at 2 o'clock in the morning. And they don't have enough of them anyway. That's a problem for them that I'm not sure they even thought about.
Well, if I may add one more thing to your train of thought, and that is that on these peak hours, during the winter season, those residents may really be out of our cage, should we, bring this annexation in to help them get into their residential area, just like we've had to provide officers for those who live in the Prospector neighborhood. Now they'll likely say, well, it's a gridlock. We can't get in and out of our Tabachi neighborhood. So then that's even more of a strain on our police office, traffic officers.
Well, right now it's a strain for the county, not us. So.
Yeah, but I'm saying, should we
I
do
agree with
the
you. I'm
annexation, and now they're
pointing-
residents of Cottonwood Heights, and they're like, hey, CHPD, what about us? And, so that's, for me, a big consideration as well.
And it should be, but then the other 300 days of the year, who's gonna be the police officer that goes up there? If you need us or watch your home. I'm not sure that they thought about that.
Couple other things that weren't touched on. One is maybe not major, but is something, the codes that Salt Lake County uses to review permits for these sensitive areas. There's steep slopes and some slope stability hazards up here. They're a little different, not quite as strict under Salt Lake County. So, the city would apply its review process for the homes that are not permitted, which are mostly the ones pushed back against the foot of the slope. That could result in those homeowners having different standards placed upon their homes than the current ones do. I don't know if that's an issue or not, but it could be stricter. It could limit, building.
Do
height
they
for
know
other
that?
things. Yeah, that has been communicated with them. And then finally, tax projections. This is very rough, but basically all I did for this is take the average value of the homes that are finished and occupied today, which came out at like 2.5 million. And then I, just multiplied that out by all of the lots there. And then they would all presumably have that residential exemption where they're assessed at 55% of their actual value. And then applied that to or multiplied that by our local tax rate. And I rounded up and it's $100,000 to $150,000 a year in tax revenue, not including that 50-acre piece.
I'm not deducting expenses to provide services.
Correct. That's just gross revenue.
That's gross revenue.
Yeah. The calculation was like $99,000 and I assume the values will go up and then they go up over time.
Well, and one other thing, I don't know if it's been assessed, but how proximal is their roadway to the water treatment plant? Is that compliant with the Clean Water Protection Act? Do you know if that's been assessed?
I don't know. I mean, the roadway
That plant's gonna
exists.
change.
I beg your pardon?
That plant's gonna change with the renovation, so.
So I mean, that might be a liability for Cottonwood Heights, if things change and then that roadway is non-compliant, that becomes a headache for us.
Ellen, yesterday, Laurie Stringham implied that there's going to be a legislation or something that's unincorporated areas of Salt Lake County are going to be forced into a city. So she said, do you remember her saying what the state legislature is going to do that or the county? So basically think about the area that's just south of me on Creek Road, that's between Sandy and Cottonwood Heights. The legislation would say that they are going to automatically be
fascinating.
annexed into the largest adjacent city, which would be Sandy right now. So she said, if we were going to annex it, we would want to annex it before this.
Yeah,
for
at
3
least we
years.
were in control of the process. That I had no idea. That's actually
So if
fascinating.
that
How would
happens
we-
here,
Yeah, I-
Is that
I
a
can say-
pending House bill or is it?
I can say they've tried to do that over the years.
Okay.
Have wall-to-wall cities and that they try and then they do a little something and then, so I'm just saying this isn't a novel.
I know with the dissolution of the, UPD, things that's gotta be becoming more real,
That situation is gonna be applicable in what she's talking about too. Who's gonna service them? If
Yeah.
not
She
Cindy
says we
Rose?
gotta get rid of the islands. What I'm unclear about from our conversation is she said this doesn't apply to an area that's in a, she said a peninsula. It's not an island. It's where unincorporated county goes off ethereally until the next county.
So are you
line.
asking then, is
So
this
I'm
an
just
island
saying,
or a
if
peninsula?
this
This is
really
an
is
island.
legislation that's coming and we're gonna be subject to it, isn't there some reason then to wait and to see if that legislation is going to affect us before we proceed with the process?
so you heard, where did you hear this from Laurie
This is
yesterday?
Laura yesterday.
Where at?
We talked to her. and
Just talking to her.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really important to pursue. So let's at least find out what they're talking about.
And this one's not, I mean, it is unincorporated county to the east all the way up till
So I don't
the
know how that's.
town of Brighton.
But my point is, when we're talking about timeline and we don't have a constraint, it might be worth waiting. to
Well, I
find
think
out if
that-
that's gonna be passed.
I think that our attorney has indicated there is a time that we have to respond to this petition, isn't there?
I think so. I think that we just have a reasonable time. We gotta have a public hearing within a reasonable time after the protest period closes, and then we need to have a decision, a reasonable time after the public hearing. We can't let things go too stale. And so, but that said, that's just this annexation petition and, they can start up another one the next day if they want to. So we just need to deal with this one within a
We have a
reasonable
45-day
time.
legislative session, so that still fits your parameters of a public hearing, maybe in 2 months.
So would that be a state decision, Shane, or a county? Because unincorporated,
That's a state,
it would come from the
state
state.
decision. Like I say, they have talked about this in the past, and there was one, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago when
Even further back, yeah.
when much of Willow Creek ended up going to Sandy, and we got a few pieces, but there still remains some unincorporated islands and peninsulas like White City, whatever, that so it's never really happened, even though they've talked about it. So it was, someday it probably will. Whether now's the time, I don't know. But I'm just wanting to tell you that it's something
Been
that
brought
comes
up
up
before.
periodically.
Maybe because of the breakup of UPD and them not having services.
Yeah. That's gotta be an impetus for it, for sure. Okay, well, we will, I think we're moving forward with the public hearing process, right? We want to hear from the public and get their thoughts. So is that the direction we need to go, or was that already planned?
That would be the next step.
Okay.
Just figuring out when that is.
So we're getting a little, need to move on along on time. So we're gonna move to item C, which is the budget amendment we talked about previously, and we'll have our administrative and fiscal services director, Scott Jervis, give us the background on this budget amendment.
All right, so we about quarterly roughly, maybe every third of a year or something, we do a budget adjustment. Excuse me, and so this is the budget adjustment roughly for the things that have come in for the last 3 months that we weren't aware of when we adopted the original budget for the city. Many of them are offset by revenue, a contribution or a grant or an MOU or something, and I'll kind of go through it. So number one is a Light the Heights contribution from Rocky Mountain Power. We received $2,000 from Rocky Mountain Power to go to Light the Heights. So this is to recognize the contribution of the revenue and then also to increase the expense by the 2,000. So there's a net zero impact to the city on that particular adjustment. Oh, you know what? I actually made copies of this and
So while you're passing that out, I'm confused. So we're showing a $2,000 expense on the Light the Heights.
So there's more than the amount that Ann has in her budget in order to do Cottonwood Heights. She's constantly looking for contributions to be able to augment the amount. And so when she gets those contributions, then in the past, what she did, the amount that she's done, she may not spend all $2,000 specifically on that. where she might, potentially shuffle it around to other events that she has. But we typically, when we get a contribution, we also do a corresponding increase in our expense.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's kind of been the history of how we've done it. Number two, there's an EDC Utah grant. And this was actually for the mayor video that we actually did in our prior fiscal year, but the grant did not come in until just recently. And that's for $1,750. And so we're recognizing that revenue. With grants, there is a requirement that we don't do what's called supplanting, which is recognize the revenue in and then not increase expenses. So we need to increase expenses. We may not spend the money. And this will be in the mayor council budget. So it'll be sitting there, but we probably won't actually spend money on, additional monies because we spent this in the prior year. Okay. Item number three is the Utah Division of Arts and Museum grant. This is $4,500. I believe we talked about this several council meetings back. We utilize this money specifically for some of the cost of the culture coordinator. So that money has already been budgeted, expecting this grant to come in, so we don't have to increase the expense for that. So that's just $4,500 of revenue. Item number four is a ZAP grant, and this is for the Cottonwood Arts Council, $16,910 that will come in over the course of the year, and they utilize this for a combination of the musical and some of the other items that go along with Arts Council that they do. Item number five, this is a timing issue. So we had a Harley Davidson that was on order for, I don't know how long, 6 months, something like that. And we expected it to come in and get paid for out of last year's budget, and it didn't. It came in I think November, if I remember right, the bill for that and everything. So what we're wanting to do is utilize those funds that were budgeted in last year's budget for the purchase of that. The actual expense came in at $34,313. And so that we can go ahead and recognize the expense of that in our current fiscal year. Item number six, we sold a vehicle used by the police department, a Nissan Armada. And want to utilize those funds to purchase vehicles for the 3 new officers that we added. This was something that we talked about at the time that we did that. The actual sales price of that came in at $25,500. So we'd add that back into the budget for that reason. Item number seven is a variety of donations that came into the police department. $500 from Christian Nielsen, $125 from, I'm not sure how to say his name, Baker Rosovo. $5,057 from honorary colonels for a total of $5,682. And that would be for a variety of different things in the police department, family Christmas party, a few other items. But increase the expense and increase the expenditures. Let's see, the recreation center reimbursement for the Thanksgiving 5K overtime, that was $1,950, and that's for our officers to provide service up in that area specific to that event. So increase in revenue and expenditures. Item number 8, oh man, look, I got 4 8s. I gotta proofread this a little bit more. It's a really special.
I am not playing poker.
So this is DUI overtime reimbursement, $4,272. This is an MOU that we have with the Utah Division of Public Safety, where they pay our officers for doing overtime on DUI shifts, $4,272 increase in expense and revenue. Court restitution costs, we received $436 during the course of this particular time period. And usually this is caused by maybe somebody does damage to, say, a police car or something along those lines. And so we typically put it in police because they have to incur those expenses to fix the cars and different things like that happen as a result of these things. And it never covers all of our expenses. We just recognize what happens to come in. Again, increasing revenue and expenditure on that. And the last item is an MOU for pedestrian enforcement. I couldn't remember where this one was. Is this state of Utah?
What is this? Same things.
Yeah.
We do the crosswalk enforcement and.
What does the MOU stand for?
Memorandum of Understanding. So it's not like a grant. We just agree with in this case, probably the state
State of Utah,
Division of Public
highway
Safety,
safety.
highway safety, that will go and do these shifts and they'll reimburse us for the extra costs that we incur for doing those shifts. And so anyhow, so the net on this is an increase in expenditures of 94,942, an increase in revenue of 65,129. So the net cost to us of the 29,813, most of that being in that timing of that Harley Davidson purchase that was delayed. Offset a little bit.
Budgeted.
So that's what I got there.
Awesome. Any questions, comments for Scott?
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, the next item, we're gonna keep you, Scott, here is just about budget calendar discussion. This is obviously budget season and we're gonna talk about just the dates here real quickly, what we can expect to pass a 24-25 budget year.
Yeah, so this is a budget calendar. We do this every year as we prepare to go into the budgets. There is a copy included in your packet, but just in case you want to take some notes on it and everything. Oops, I'll get that to the right thing. Sorry. We've already started gathering from the department directors anything that they're aware of that might need to have an adjustment in the budget. Tim gave us some direction on that a week ago yesterday, to keep things as flat as possible. But we're going through and looking at different agreements we have. Some have some inflationary increases, some have year-over-year increases, different things like that, trying to figure out what is going on. Anytime when we can offset, we're gonna offset, but we'll assemble that list so that eventually at some point in time, we can review that with the budget committee and others. That is targeted to end on February 2nd. February 5th, I'll review with him kind of the full listing of that. We'll kind of continue to look at things that come in during different times during February 6th to 16th. Tim and I will meet with the different department directors to try and be for sure familiar with what it is that they're asking for, make sure that we understand what they're asking for, why it is, and different things like that. Let's see, throughout the time, I'll kind of put together some preliminary guesstimates on what the increases will be, how it relates back to the 5-year plan and different things like that. February 24th, of course, is our council retreat planned date. And during that, we'll review a lot of things. We'll, of course, set budget priorities and expectations, review the 5-year plan, different things like that. There's some tentative dates. The March 12th is a budget committee meeting, and that's a tentative date. That was just going to be targeted to be around there. Tim will work with the people on the budget committee to pinpoint a date that is acceptable for everybody to meet and to schedule that at some point in time. Again, with the compensation committee, same thing. We'll have a meeting around that date that will get discussed between Tim and whoever's on that meeting so that we can get that scheduled at a time that's appropriate and that works for everyone. Again, March 19th, I'll continue to update different requests that come in and everything so that we're ready to go. And those are the items that get discussed when we discuss things with the budget committee and the compensation committee. Oftentimes, Tim might update you in your individual meetings as to what he's seeing and different things. He talks to the mayor often on that. And then on the 26th, again, budget and compensation committee, tentative meetings, but that could change. I'm basically hitting off weeks from council meetings to see if there'd be an opportunity, but they can float around different times that are easy. March 26th, let's see.
Compensation budget, both the
Yeah.
same on the 26th.
Yeah, so on the 16th of April, there's a compensation committee report at the council meeting and then also a budget committee report at the council meeting. And this is where the full council becomes fully aware of everything that's been going on in those different meetings so that you can make sure that you got all your minds coming together on that. April 19th, we'll kind of be assembling the proposed budget, trying to get us money, the kinks worked out of that so that we're ready to go. There's a tentative council work budget session our budget work session on April 23rd. In the past couple of years, we have not done this. This would be a third council meeting if it indeed happened. And it's basically if it's needed, if we feel we're behind or there's a lot of things that need to be discussed, then that could become a reality. Again, if that were to happen, Tim would discuss that with each of you individually and the mayor to try and figure out, do we need to do that? And like I said, the last couple of years, we haven't, had to schedule that. And then we are required by law to adopt at our first council meeting in May, which would be May 7th, the tentative budget. And the tentative budget just puts a budget that's probably a framework of largely what will be adopted, but puts that out there so that the public can see it. They can make comments on it back to you. They can make comments to Tim and others so that we can then start that refining process at the end. On May 21st, we'd have another council budget work session where we can talk about the budget more at that point in time. On June 4th, we would have our first public hearing on the budget adoption. We would not actually adopt the budget on that day because we will not have our property tax rates at that time. They come in around June 10th. It could be the 8th to the 10th, right in that kind of time frame. Once we get that, then we could potentially adopt the budget at that point in time. We're actually legally required to adopt the budget by June 22nd. So our next meeting would be June 18th, and we would anticipate that we would probably adopt the budget at that time if there's no tax increase. If there's a tax increase, then we would propose a tax increase, and then we would have an additional meeting in August in order to, that would be a meeting that has to be disclosed on the state tax commission website and a bunch of other things in order to go through that. We're not anticipating that at this point in time, so that's not something that's on the radar. So anyhow, and then at the bottom, you can kind of see the different council membership makeups and the different committees and what have you. And so if there are any adjustments to this is not set in stone, of course. It can be adjusted and everything as we go along, but that's kind of our plan at this point in time with the budget.
Perfect. Any questions on the calendar? Thanks, Scott. I know it's a busy time for you and we appreciate all you do to keep us on top of things. So thank you.
Yeah, I just asked one quick question before we start. So the 5-year projected budget, when would we be able to take a look at that?
I think we talked about having that ready for the retreat, right?
Yeah, the retreat, I'll be ready to have a really good review with everyone. It's mostly assembled now. I've reviewed it with Kim, of course. And then I've reviewed it really briefly. I mean, I think I talked to you for 5 minutes about it, Mayor. And so there's just a couple maybe refining things that need to be done on it, and then it will be ready to go. But I think our plan anyhow is probably to have that ready for the retreat. Whether it goes out before then, that would be Mayor and
I would really like to see it and study it well before the retreat, because it's something that we need to deliberate during the retreat. And if I haven't had a chance to study it well in advance of the retreat.
I think we talked about doing that, getting it out a couple of weeks before the retreat. Yeah, but talking about it at the retreat.
Yes, but I think it takes studying it and contemplating it well in at least 2 weeks in advance so that there can be meaningful discussion at the retreat.
Yep, I
Thank you.
will definitely pass that information
Thank
to
you.
Tim. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Scott. Okay, item E is the off-street parking modifications that we talked about in a previous meeting as well. Chief and Shane, are you both ready to talk about that, or that's, tell me what, Shane, you're.
Yeah, there's the thing that's on the agenda tonight, the ordinance is just deals with RV parking, because we had the current ordinance allows RVs only to stay on the streets for 2 hours in any, I think, 24-hour period. And so there was a discussion a few weeks ago that didn't allow enough time for a family that has an RV who gets in late from a trip to unload their vehicle and clean it and then get it to storage. And so I think that the proposal was that we extend that time period from 2 hours to 24 hours. And so that's what this ordinance would do, is allow an RV to be parked on the street in front of the owner's house for up to 24 hours within any 7-day period for the purpose of loading, unloading it, cleaning it, whatever. So anyway, that's what's on the agenda tonight, and I don't know if you want to have a discussion on that. There's another thing that I think is what Robbie and I were to speak of on this agenda item, which concerns just the fact that, well, Robbie can explain it better, but we have people parking illegally, and just saying that's okay because I'm paying a lot to go skiing, and so this will allow me to get there a little bit quicker. And so I think the discussion point was whether we should look at increasing costs or things where they're parking in the city. So they're kind of two related, but a little bit different.
A little bit different. So let's talk about what the council, if we're good with the 20, going from 2 hours to 24.
I don't, yeah,
Sorry.
no.
I'm not.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not either. I don't think 24 hours is enough time for someone to, especially people coming off of a trip. You're gonna unload, you may get here late, your vehicle's parked, and then you have to figure out if you can get your vehicle back to the place where you either rent a space or be able to move that vehicle to another location. And sometimes that takes a lot of time, depending on what type of trip you've taken. And a lot of people don't have that kind of space on the side of their home to do that. I mean, 2 days is a long time, but I mean, even if you went 36 hours, it's something that gives people more time to be able to make those adjustments. When they come in, because it takes a long time to clean up an RV and to make sure that you've done everything you need to do to it. That includes going up there to the Cottonwood Cemetery and, you know, doing all that part and cleaning and everything else as well. So there's a lot to it.
Councilmember Highland, what are your thoughts?
I don't like 24 hours. Sorry, my neighbor will completely take advantage of that. I can't see around it.
That's the
I see it as a public safety problem. I also see that, you know, if you can't get it to your storage facility because the storage facility is not open, that's a private sector problem, not a public sector problem. And so sleeping in it overnight, well, hey, you can't find a place to, you know, stay, just come stay in my RV because I can park it here for 24 hours. So I think that it could be
So
taken
the
advantage
current
of.
2 hours, what you're okay with?
I can even extend that to 6, but I just don't like the overnight possibility.
Taking advantage of it is a concern of mine too.
Councilmember Burrell, any thoughts?
Well, I want to be sympathetic to people who own RVs. But again, I think that that is a dynamic that you need to consider before you purchase an RV. Where do you store it? How do you maintain it? You know, how do you do all these things? And I tend to agree with Councilmember Highland that I like the tighter restriction. So I do not favor 24 hours.
Councilmember Holton, are you on the line still?
Can I ask a question? Would this eventually include boats? I know it already includes utility vehicles, but
Yeah,
I mean, for me, like example, if my boat, I'm gonna take a boat trip. I'm gonna park it in front of the house, I'm gonna load it up the night before. And in the morning, I wanna jump in the truck in the boat and take off. I'm way past the 2 hours.
Yeah, recreational vehicles include any vehicular unit. Other than
So the question I have, Sean, is, you know, a lot of this is, in my mind, is what driveways are for. So in case they don't have a driveway, I guess, but, you know, unloading and loading RVs usually can have a, you know, most homes have driveways that they can do that. So I don't think we're talking about a whole big segment population for this, right? Unless I'm seeing something wrong.
Probably not, I think so.
Yeah,
But you know, the four wheelers, the
yeah,
snowmobiles, the boats, the people do that the night before.
Yeah.
And they can load up their vehicle.
Those are all included.
Take off.
So-
Yeah, that's my concern there, because that impacts.
I think 2 hours is too little. I am not sure on that. 24 hours Sean, so maybe can we adjust the
Yeah,
time?
you can, move to amend it and we can just interlineate here the number of
So-
hours. So
Then you're okay with 6?
What would you propose? No, I'm a boat owner, but I can put it in my driveway and then consider it that way, but I
Yeah.
do have neighbors who will completely take advantage of this.
And
put it
I'm
out the
sure,
street,
I'm sure.
Even though they
people
have
will.
driveway space.
Yeah, I'm sure people will as well, but I'm just thinking about, for me, I would connect my truck to the same thing, so the whole rig would be out in front of my house to be able to take off in the morning. And I guess I could live with 24 hours, but I know that that's still gonna be, for the very few that'll take advantage of it, it's gonna cause the most headache for a whole bunch of folks.
Yeah.
But I think for most residents, a little time consideration, sometimes you just, especially if you're taking a whole cruise, you're taking all the kids, grandkids, and everybody else.
Yeah.
It could become very.
To me, I think I thought about 12, only because, if you're loading up at night, you can always, drive it around and you have it parked by 8 PM and you leave by 8 AM in the morning and you're
That's
good.
pretty useful.
Thoughts? Got too long for you two? Is Councilmember Holton online? Did we
Yeah,
just
Mayor, can
figure
you,
it out?
can you repeat what you just said, Mayor?
No.
Deal.
Just kidding, Matt, just kidding. So, the determination is the current ordinance says you can park an RV for 2 hours and it has to be moved. Councilmember Newell is for sure in favor of a longer time frame. Up, 24 hours is his minimum. Councilmember Burrell and Councilmember Highland are really suggesting less. I kind of suggested a 12-hour, if you're loading at night, 8, 9 o'clock, then I think then first thing in the morning, 8, 9 AM, you can be expected to leave. But, so I don't know if 12 would be a compromise, but what do you think, Councilmember Holton? What are your thoughts on it?
So having talked to these folks that are bringing using these vehicles, a typical trend is that they'll bring them to their home on like a Thursday afternoon, evening. They'll load it up and then because they want it to be ready by the time they get off work on a Friday to go. So there's at least 24 hours. Then when they're returning it, they're usually on a long trip home, parking it on let's call it a Saturday night, whatever. And then when they get the next morning, they're still, I don't know if you've ever used these vehicles. I've rented a couple. I mean, it takes hours and hours just to properly clean, haul all your stuff out, give it a scrub down. I mean, you've got to empty the water, the whole 9 yards, that it takes a while. That I personally, I wouldn't like to
Think
see
that could be done in a driveway?
anything less than 24 hours. Well, see, how are you counting the time if you're pulling it in on a driveway and then you're parking it back out on the street? Does that start the shot clock over again?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where we could be taken advantage of. So I'm trying to think of the history. Why is it 2 hours? Why is holiday 2 hours? Why were we 2 hours? Is it because in the past there's been this experiment and people take advantage of it? So we have to go back to restricted?
I think it's important that we consider the nuisance aspect. If it's parked on the side of a road for too long, it's a nuisance. It takes up a lot of space in the roadway. It blocks visibility. So, to me, 12 hours kind of encapsulates enough
mean,
time.
Again, I've been a boat owner, and when I think about the use of a driveway and a garage. So if the reason why you don't want your RV in your driveway is because you have cars in the garage, well, put your cars on the curb so that your RV can be in your driveway. I don't know, it seems to me this is a personal property management issue that needs to be managed by the owner of the RV. I don't see it as as something that the city needs to take on for the convenience of the 1% of the population that owns an RV. I don't see that as a benefit to the 99% of people who are gonna have to put up with the RVs in the roadways.
Well, to your point, if it's such a small amount, it doesn't happen often. There are people that choose to recreate this way. I personally don't have a problem with them having 24 hours to do what they need to do and then get it out of the neighborhood. But to say you've got 2 hours, some of these people may not be able to, not everyone's situation is a driveway with a garage. That doesn't exist for everybody. So to say that
I
they need
think, I
to
think
do
we're in
everything,
agreement that 2 hours is probably too short a time frame. The
Agreed.
question, Matt, for you and John, would 12 hours be enough? 12 hours would require them to load at night and take off the next morning. If it was parked on the street overnight
Or to arrive late at night and get it out of the, by the morning.
by the morning. So to me, that doesn't seem too onerous, but
again, I'll just say I would like to have a little more time. Only because if you're coming back from a trip and your whole family's just ready to crash, it's really tough for you to get everything done within 12 hours and get it out of there. What's the magic number? I don't know, but to think that they're just gonna come back from a long trip and then wake up in the morning and immediately get it out of there is probably not. It's probably not happening right now. It's just not being enforced. Chief, I don't know what your thoughts are. Your folks probably see it out there more often.
is it an issue you've run into very often, Chief?
No, we don't get a lot of calls on it. When we do, it's because that guy who keeps taking advantage of it,
Yeah.
But
and we
That's-
handle that.
I got that
on this
neighbor.
visual.
I got that neighbor.
So pulling it into the driveway for a few hours would also start the time over as well anyway, right?
It would.
And how does that reflect on us in the code that we put in? They go, that's stupid, all I'm gonna do
I know.
is park in there and then I'm gonna come back out.
Yeah.
Because I think the spirit of the law is, them going to the gas station and coming back shouldn't reset the clock. Or going around the block and coming back, that's a little ridiculous. I think the spirit of the law is we're giving you enough time, be a good neighbor, pack up, clean up, get it out of there. That's it. But I think they need a decent amount of time to do that. So I'd be in favor of 24 hours. If there's less than that, I'm happy to entertain that as well.
24 hours in a 1 week period, the way I'm reading the ordinance is, does that mean I take a trip on Thursday, come back Sunday? So I have 12 hours on Thursday, 12 hours on Sunday? How does that read?
No, it's 24 hours every time.
But it says within any 1 week. 24 hours within any 1 week.
So
I'm
is
just
that
reading
your
the ordinance.
interpretation too? Because I'm thinking that they would leave and they come back and then I think it resets the clock and
That's what I think would happen, but,
Or up to 24 hours within any 1 week period.
you're right. That's confusing to me too.
Yeah, that
The 1 week thing is confusing to me.
people do take them for weekends,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
I could be persuaded for the 12 hours because of what Council Member Newell said, that, loading it up the night before, taking off in the morning, arriving late at night, getting it taken care of by the morning. But I'm leaning towards, you have one of these vehicles, you know what you're getting into. And I don't like using our roadways for extensive parking. I cannot see around these vehicles on my street. And I have kids that can run through, just riding their bikes, what child would stop to think that they needed to, look past that RV to see if I'm coming out of my driveway?
I think I'd be okay at 12. Councilmember Burrell, how about you? I mean, I know we have, 12 is better than 2, but tell me what your thoughts are.
Well, I'm a believer in compromise. I always have compromised as necessary and I don't know how urgent this is to come up with a decision. So if the rest of the council is in favor of 12 hours, I can support that.
I still tell you, 12 is tough, because if you come home at 11 o'clock, you gotta go to sleep. Now you gotta get up in the morning, you're trying to do 6 hours.
Hold
work
in the
on that
driveway,
vehicle.
you could,
Yeah,
there's some options.
yeah, that's
I
a
know,
little tough.
I know.
But that's assuming, Mayor, that everyone's got a driveway to pull it into.
Yeah,
Who has an RV that doesn't? That's what I don't remember.
Well, you rent them, you don't buy them. So
Well,
if you're in a rental apartment or let's call it a duplex, duplex where there's this, it's just not a feasible situation. I mean, I don't own one. I just rented one. I did pull mine in my driveway, so I have that ability. I'm just looking out for those that can't pull it into a driveway.
Some have very high slope driveways, that's not gonna work.
Yeah, like Edie Smart, for instance, Moorcrest Circle, those homes, their driveways are so steep you couldn't park. There's no way you could park it there.
Well, there's also this limitation that it has to be in front of the residential dwelling unit occupied by the owner.
Hmm.
And so that means that doesn't apply to an apartment
Yeah.
owner. That doesn't apply to somebody even on a cul-de-sac
Somebody
because they
renting a
can't
home.
actually park it in front of their residence.
So they can't park it at all. So Edie Smart, or whoever you just mentioned, she wouldn't be able to park the RV anywhere according to our ordinance then, if she can't park it in front of her home in her cul-de-sac. Am I interpreting that correctly?
That's the way I'm reading it.
But I mean, I think that's actually an important part of it, whatever we
I think
do.
it's a very
I don't
important
want
part.
my neighbor's RV in front of my house.
Exactly, exactly.
When my father-in-law came to visit, we asked my neighbor if he could park his RV in front of their house, or at least halfway through, and they said, yes, that's fine.
Yeah.
And he was there for, I won't say how long.
Oh, goodness. Well,
And could I just say something?
Yes.
Going to Councilmember Highland's concern, maybe addressing the issue of, fractional bits of 24 hours, multiple fractional bits of 24 hours within a week. Maybe that could be addressed by inserting, I don't know if you have it before you, I can read it. Provided, however, that a recreational vehicle may be parked on a public street fronting a residential dwelling occupied by the owner or user of that vehicle for, and then here would be the insert, a single parking span of, then going back up to 24 hours within any 1 week period to allow time. for
what if you set up to, well, whatever
Or a
amount of hours we
single
say
parking
in a
span.
48-hour period? Because people don't go usually for less than 2 days,
Mhm.
but they do a weekend, they do it, so. I don't,
If you said 48 hours, well, then they could do it every 3 days.
right, but I don't think people are going for shorter than 2. And anyway, yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, that's a possible change.
Let's do this. So I think we have enough votes to go to 12. So let's go to 12 and evaluate. And if we get, more people concerned and tickets written, maybe we reevaluate. Cause I know we've got 3 votes with Ellen, Suzanne, and myself for 12. So, and I know you guys would probably like longer, but let's go ahead and do that for now, Shane. So we'll adjust to 12 hours.
With Shane's amendment,
With that little bit that I just mentioned.
I'm okay with that. Is everybody else okay with that?
Oh, and that amendment, remind me, that's to have a higher fine,
No,
oh, that's a whole different
it's
thing.
for a single parking span of up to 12 hours within any 1 week period. A single parking span, in other words, that was intended.
And
to
that means
get
they can't go drive around the block and park again.
Okay. Got it.
I like that. I think it gives some teeth for me as a neighbor to say, look, you've had your, travel trailer out there for 2 days. There's limits 12 hours. Move it, or I'm going to call enforcement.
Okay, so then I will write that change into the ordinance here.
We'll still vote on it.
As amended, as whoever makes the motion amended as discussed in the work session.
Okay, and then Chief, you had a piece you want to talk about still or no? Are we good?
I'm sorry,
Is there another piece we need to talk about?
no,
Okay.
that was what.
That was-
Transfer issue.
No, then there's.
Oh,
The fine.
No, now, okay, I thought. Okay,
Then there's just the parking plans.
all right, yes. So do you want to move on?
Be easier, I hope.
Yes, yes.
The other part is the park, where you park on private property, on public property, and the fines associated with that. parking has become a bigger problem this year than we've ever seen it. Part of the issue is when you go to the ski resorts, they're pretty, their reservation system is working very well for them. But it costs you $25 to reserve a spot. And they put them out one day and they're gone within a couple hours. So people are coming down and they're parking wherever in our city and on the parking rides. And the fine for that is $25 if you get caught. Now, valley-wide, we were under the impression that the administrator, the court, or the courts decided what the fine associated with that is. That is not accurate. You decide what that number is. And we've done a study, and the surrounding agencies go anywhere between $70 to $125 for a parking fine.
Brighton's at 150.
150, there you go. And it's to dissuade people from parking wherever you want, because what they're thinking, and they've told us this, is I can make a reservation and pay $25, or I can just take my chances and see whether you catch me or not. And if you do, I still pay the $25. $25 is not a deterrent. And so our recommendation is that you give some consideration for a number somewhere between the $70 and $125 to deter people from parking where they're not supposed to. And when I say where they're not supposed to, they fill those parking rides, and I have some pictures, and you can see where it. She'll bring it up in a second, but in addition to what you're going to see, they're blocking driveways, they're blocking mailboxes, so you can't get your mail. They're coming within 20 feet of an intersection, which is a component of this too. We want to prohibit parking from within 20 feet of an intersection for safety reasons, because you don't have that diagonal view and you can't see the turn, and it is safety. But look at the parking right. They're 3 rows deep. Some of them are 4 rows deep in there. And so if you get back, if you look out there early and you parked and you came home and you were trying to you can't leave until 2 other people decide to come back down off the mountain and move their cars. So we impound those cars, but now we're finding we can't even they're so crowded, we can't even get a tow truck in there to impound the cars. So we want to assess a deterrent to them, and that is the parking tickets. And again, right now it's $25, and we want to.
I am completely in favor of higher fines. The last time I was in Salt Lake City and I was 2 minutes late to get to my car in the meter, and then I had whatever I had, it was, I remember, $100 fine for, so
And at the end of the day, you're not blocking 2 other people in who can't get home with their families and want to do it. And the other issues, this is going to apply to any public parking. So it'll apply to parking rides, the high schools and things. And that's important too, because we want them to park in the stalls and not just and this also clarifies that they have to park in a designated stall. So they aren't blocking the corners of the streets, and they're not blocking emergency ingress and egress so we had a problem like at Brighton, there was an injured player and we could not get the ambulance out there because they couldn't get the ambulance through. People were blocking it. And so, we can impound those cars, but a $25 ticket does not,
right.
sort of.
I think
They'll just pay
Go
that.
ahead.
I was just gonna ask a quick question about our liability with Hillside and that parking,
Our liability and
with the parking at Hillside. So if there's somebody slips and falls on ice in that parking lot, it's the city's property, we're liable for that, right? But we're allowing that ski parking to take place there as well. Kind of don't put your.
The
The good news is we're having
that's a separate
going,
question, but it's
snow
true.
plow it really fast after it snows.
But
Right?
it's just that in this litigious society, it takes just that 1 or 2 that's gonna come back. And I keep thinking about that every time I pass there.
Yeah. I think
I
it's
don't know
part,
what we can do.
I'm okay with $100, but I think there's a lot of out of towners who don't even care about $100. You know, 150 that they assess if you're like just barely over the line in Big Cottonwood Canyon. They tow your car, so you have that fee, plus you have the $150 fine, is my understanding.
It is, and I think they figured out a way to do it civilly. So the fine they have a civil process in which to collect the fees.
I'm more concerned about the person that can't afford $100, but it's a deterrent and then people can always go argue in front of a judge and judges are lenient a lot of times and knock fines down, but I'm okay with that. I think we're all in agreement to raise the fee.
Well, you just have to tell us what that number is.
I'm good at
We were good with
75.
whatever. To us, higher is better because we can, it really is, they're just doing it because they can.
Yeah.
And, we've written hundreds of tickets and it's $25, big deal.
Hmm.
It doesn't faze them. So,
Let's start at 75. I think we've got agreement to that. And if we need to adjust, we
is that your number?
Yeah.
75?
Is it high enough in your opinion?
Oh,
You're the policymakers. I support it that higher is better, and if, you know, the low is 70 around the valley, and we're talking about you in the parking stall, you know, these are people who, you come home off the mountain and you've got your kids, and you're tired, and you're in your car, and you're sitting there and you're waiting, and now you're mad because you can be there hours before somebody decides to come down there and move their car because they shouldn't have been there in the first place, and
so the range you're indicating is 70 at the low, and what's the higher point?
125.
Brian charges 150.
Yeah.
So if we went to 100, would everybody be okay with that?
So where do the cars go that cannot park in that parking space? That parking lot.
Well, they double park, they do a lot of different things,
That's what I mean.
and
Where are they
we
gonna go?
impound those.
Yeah,
We don't let them
okay.
do that.
Or
We suggest they find a park and ride and take the bus.
Take a bus
Yeah.
instead of
That,
crowding the
that,
parking lot.
isn't that what you want?
That's what-
Don't you
that's
want to
what-
force them to 94th?
Yeah, those
So-
little horses, little horses.
Because for $25, you're not going to 94th.
Yeah.
For 100 or 125, they're gonna go to 94th.
And that'll get on the Facebook Icon Pass group. I mean, it'll spread quickly. So people, so it's a different.
You're right, you only have to do it once.
Right.
I think 100 at
I'm okay
least.
with 100 because I know from my own experience, you can go before the judge and you say, look, I couldn't even see the lines. It was so snowy. I didn't know I did that. And the judge can be lenient, but I'm more comfortable with that. I'm empathetic to what you said.
Well, and the officers still have discretion. If it looks like something where someone's just made an honest mistake and they couldn't see the snow or stuff, they're not citing those. It's the deliberate parking and the I don't care, you know, I'm gonna do what I want that they find. It's the other ones they have good discretion on, they use good judgment on, I think.
perfect. Let's do it at 100. So we're gonna move on to item F and Mike, if you're okay to take probably 15, I'm gonna move our G to our next meeting. So,
Okay.
but
I don't have that much.
Okay.
A couple minutes is probably all I need.
okay, let's go to item F, which is the general plan process.
Yeah, this is just to check in on where these projects are. You'll remember the general plan and the form-based code were funded together, so they're two very different and both very large projects, but they're moving forward kind of simultaneously. The general plan, we're updating the very rough draft that we had initially based on public input and the joint work session we held and even ongoing input that we've heard in the town center public forum meetings and through other discussions that have come up. So I think it's going to land in a really good place. My goal is to have maybe a summary report of the updated information, probably ready in March to share with the council, and then we'll go into formal public input and get it in the formal process from there.
It would be helpful for me to see, the existing and what direction the changes seem to be taking.
Sure.
That would be really helpful, versus a summary report that stands separate from, I want to feel the progression.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get information, but if I don't have a way to compare it, I can't see the direction that it's going. And
Yeah, I can work on that. I don't have anything formal like that yet. We have the existing rough drafts. I think those were sent out at some point. We can certainly resend those. And then it's a bunch of, it's in some cases, handwritten notes of, hey, we need to change this. This is written wrong. This is not our intent. But I could work on a formalized report between now and the next update to say, this is the direction this is moving. Based on discussions, smart growth principles, neighborhood centers, looking at our roadway designs, especially in our town center area. Those are some of the big things we're trying to hit on.
yeah, I'm not asking for every meticulous thing. I'm
course.
more looking for, as you just said, okay, we didn't have neighborhood, commercial centers And now we're looking to add content
Yeah.
on that, that's the kind of broader that I would be very interested in.
Yeah, I can work on that, probably in a couple of weeks, have that. Just an informal guide for you.
Thank you.
So again, we're hoping to be in full public input swing, spring, summer of this year and just keep that going until it's done. I think, we've got a good sense of direction. We just have to put that together in a draft and make it a cohesive plan and do the public engagement that we need to and get it to where we can have that ready for adoption. Form-based code. This came to you just in December. I think the consultant came in with an update at the first December meeting. That it's moving along nicely. There's a draft that's been in review by the planning commission. And then the consultant came in and updated the council on that. There will be a public open house scheduled it'll be a citywide open house, but targeting the people that are affected by where we're proposing to implement the form-based code. In March, we've kind of started to finalize a date for that. And then that will lead into hopefully planning commission recommendation shortly after that, because they've been reviewing that, and then on to council. So I would think by April or May, that will be a formal draft at the council, ready to discuss and deliberate and work on at the council level. That's all I have. That's it.
So is the form-based code, is the planning commission actually working on details?
They have a full draft ordinance and they've submitted comments and questions, and we're in the process of responding to those. I actually think our consultant will be at the planning commission work session tomorrow with another update.
Could we get those disseminated to the council as soon as possible? I wonder if the council wouldn't be better to look at some of the things they're talking about earlier, rather than waiting for the finding to get to the council and us saying, oh, no, we don't like this and this and this.
So what we've done, we have the full draft. It's long and it's kind of hard to navigate, but we have a bunch of, I think this is what we should, the council meeting last time was an abbreviated document, just kind of, what is this? What are the frequent questions? Just trying to help, summarize what this is, because it's a different way of doing land use regulation. We can send that stuff all out to the city council.
So I know the last time we had Mark from VODA here, one of the concerns that I had was that on the form-based code, the level at which streetscape was going to be set at or was leaning in the direction was still at speeds and with volume that are not commensurate for a main street walkable area. So like for me, I share the mayor's concern that if you're continuing to go down a path of more volume, and I'm just saying I'm not saying that that's what the council majority wants, but I think it would be prudent to have us deliberate on some of these key form-based codes elements that are being advanced in case we do by consensus really say, oh, wait a minute, can we bring the steamship back this direction, or
Kind of make sure we're on the same page.
yeah, that would be lovely.
So if we send out the materials and then, give you some time to review it, and then I think what would be helpful is, so we're not coming in trying to guess what you want to talk about, and maybe some of it's totally fine and there's agreement on it, feedback on, hey, we've got questions on this section, could you explain this? We can kind of refine that, and maybe at some point, in the next couple of months, bring that back in for a council discussion.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, we'll get those materials sent out to you.
Okay. Awesome. I'm excited for that.
Yeah,
I am not going to do item G still, because I think we, 2.5 hours is plenty. We need a little bit of a break to eat and refuel for our other meeting. So we'll push item G to, our, next first meeting in February. And so let me real quickly, do a review of calendars and upcoming events, so the Utah Arts and Museums Traveling Exhibit, the Eyes Have It is what it's called, is January 2nd through February 1st. And that's here at the City Hall lobby. The Chinese New Year celebration, which is Saturday, February 3rd from 10 a.m. to noon, is in the City Hall Community Room. Cool, we're doing that. City Hall will be closed Monday, February 19th for President's Day. Musical editions for the Beauty and the Beast play are scheduled for March 15th, 16th, and 23rd in the City Hall Community Room. And the Easter egg hunt, crazy, we're already talking about that. Saturday, March 30th, beginning at 10 a.m. at Butler Park. So no closed meeting today. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our work session and be in our business meeting in 25 minutes.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second that.
Thanks. All in favor, say aye.
Right?
Okay, we're adjourned.